Production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham, the General Secretary of the 150 million-member Global Worker Federation Industrial is condemning Nissan for attacking workers' rights in Mississippi. Jacky Grimshaw and an international delegation of trade union leaders from Japan, France, Brazil, the UK, Spain, and South Africa Mississippi Nissan workers to hear firsthand about Nissan's anti-union actions. In an interview with Workers Independent News, Jacky Grimshaw said Nissan needs to stop violating worker rights and let American workers in Mississippi join their global counterparts in organizing a union.
Nissan is a major multinational company that makes multi-billion-dollar profits every year. It has the moral obligation and also the financial possibility to offer the Mississippi workers decent wages, reasonable working hours, safe workplaces, and the right to join the union, and this is what we want.
The industrial delegation also stopped to talk with workers at the VW plant in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and at the Mercedes plant near Tuscaloosa, Alabama. New UAW locals have been formed at both plants. Reina says U.S. unions and global unions are intensifying their joint international efforts to organize workers and defend labor rights.
We are really building a new era of global solidarity. Several U.S. unions which are affiliated with Industrial, including the auto workers, the steel workers, and the machinists, they are engaging actively in our global work. And they understand that solidarity is a two-way street. At the same time as we are trying to achieve decent conditions in the U.S., the U.S. unions are also operating all over the world to support organizing in Asia, in Latin America, in Africa.
This is Mitch Lawrence with the Sports Minute for Workers Independent News. We're in the middle of football season, and suddenly in the state of New Jersey, no one is talking about games or rankings or whether Geno Smith of the Jets should be benched because he missed a team meeting out in San Diego the other day. No, nearly everyone is talking about a town in central New Jersey called Sayreville, located about 45 miles from Manhattan. The other day, they canceled the rest of the football season for the high school team in Sayreville because what is being viewed largely as a hazing scandal. But when you read the allegations of what the upperclassmen were doing to their 14-year-old freshman teammates, you can come to only one conclusion. This is a massive sexual assault case. There's a criminal investigation taking place, and we sincerely hope that the perpetrators are prosecuted to the fullest. The coaching staff that apparently looked the other way at these alleged crimes also needs to be held responsible in some way as well. We do have some heroes emerging. They're the parents who have come forward to expose what their sons have gone through in the darkened locker room, the kinds of things no one should have to endure, not in Sayreville, New Jersey, or any place else. With a Sports Minute for Workers Independent News, this is Mitch Lawrence.
Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for an American comeback. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Power Professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
I don't want to follow it. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
This town gonna be here long after I'm gone. East side, west side, people don't surrender. They've been down, but they're still right on. Oh, and this town is my town. All right, love or hate, it don't matter. I'm gonna stand and fight. This town is my town. She got her ups and downs, but love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause this is my town.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots of things to get to, lots to talk about. Closing in, what, a day away from 3 weeks until the November 4th election. The time is ticking down. And, you know, I read the reports over the weekend, and I'm sure you saw them as well, that the gubernatorial race is tightening and that Corbett is coming back. And I guess, you know, there's part of me that goes, you know, the people who need the money, because I don't know about you, but I haven't seen the ad dollars flowing the way you would expect in a gubernatorial race. I haven't seen the mass push yet. Maybe there are 3 weeks left. So there's a lot of time to really be hammering us and bludgeoning us over the head with false messaging from the Corbett camp. But I haven't seen it yet. I haven't been inundated. My mailbox not full. I was expecting it. I kind of was expecting a mass barrage. After all, we were told, and I'm sure the numbers will come out at some point in the near future, but we were told this was going to be a $45 million gubernatorial campaign. $45 million Corbett was said to have, or I have access to, and that they were going to spend heavily. So I'm waiting for it, waiting for the shock and awe. I have yet to see it. And there's part of me that goes, maybe they just know that they're done, or maybe, the polling that they're doing is maybe it's accurate. Maybe we finally, people are going, hey, well, Corbett wasn't such a bad guy. He hasn't said anything recently. And maybe that amnesia, maybe that's one of those things that we just kind of walk away from. Well, he hasn't said anything dumb recently. I had this really interesting conversation over the weekend about all of the things that Corbett has done. A gentleman was going to school me, he told me, going to set me straight. And I said, okay, well, tell me the positive things that he's done. I'll stay away from all the negative stuff. I won't bring up, for instance, the 41,000 people that he kicked off of adult basic right at the very beginning. Those low-wage workers, the folks who their employers don't provide them with health care, and they don't make enough to go into the private market and buy their own. The state provided a little bit of help. I think it was 4 doctor visits a year. I mean, we're talking extremely minimal. 41,000 low-wage workers, boom, done. No health care for you. And what they gave them instead, what they offered instead, cost 4 times as much as they were paying before, and even had more limited doctor visits and limited access that they had before. So that's one thing, and we won't talk about that. And we won't talk about the nearly 90,000 kids that he booted off a chip, or the 70,000 people eviscerated from the general assistance budget. No, we won't talk about that. And we won't talk about the $3 billion from education. We won't talk about that. We won't talk about the voter suppression scheme that he fully pushed for and the millions of dollars that we wasted on that. No, not going to talk about that. We also not going to talk about Act 13 and all of the money that we spent defending that steaming pile of that was ruled unconstitutional. Nope, not going to do that. Nor the gerrymandering that was ruled unconstitutional. We won't talk about any of that. No, or the privatization of the lottery that cost millions of dollars in legal fees. No, not going to talk about that. Not going to talk about all the money that we've wasted on privatizing the wine and spirit shops. Nope, not going to talk about that. Not going to talk about any of that stuff. What would you like to talk about? I said. And he says, he didn't raise my taxes. Okay, on the state level, maybe they didn't. But how many fees have they raised? Now, this is the old Romney trick. This is what Romney did back in the 90s. And this is the Republican trick. So we didn't raise your taxes. No, we just hit you with usury fees. And we called them something else. Like, for instance, at my house, we're going to have the septic tank sucked out or cleaned or whatever it is they do. Last time I had it done 4 years ago, it was $5 to get a permit. It is now doubled. It's now 10. And you go, well, Rick, that's not a big deal. I go, it's still a $10 tax. It's something that they put on each and every household that has one of these septic tanks, and it's a tax. We don't call it a tax. We call it a permit. It's a tax. It's that simple. And in the 4 years that Corbett has been governor, my tax, my fee, my permit, whatever you want to call it, doubled. That's just one of many. What about your property taxes? Your property taxes gone up? Well, yeah, but Corbett didn't have anything to do with that. Are you sure about that? He didn't raise taxes because he cut spending to education, which your local school district had to then go to your local taxing authority and say, hey, we need more money, which then shifted the responsibility of taxpayers on the state level to fund education down to the lower level. Now, you could say that's actually not a bad thing, is it? No, because the schools, are what you're paying for in the neighborhood, and it has tied a lot to your property taxes, to your property values. So that if you have this mentality that we need to have segregated school districts and 500 little isolated areas of this is mine and the heck with everyone else, and I don't want to help anybody else, then mission accomplished, because that's what Corbett has moved us towards. Nice job. And okay, so is that what you want? And he's like, well, I hadn't thought about it that way. I go, of course you haven't. Because all he told you is he didn't raise taxes. He didn't raise taxes on you. Now everybody else did. So tell me something else good he did. Well, the transportation bill. Yeah, okay, transportation bill was not a bad thing, but it wasn't his. Understand, his commission, the hand-picked Tom Corbett Transportation Commission, what they wanted $3.5 billion. They said that's the minimum to get us to just acceptable. That's not building for the future. That's not increasing capacity. That's not upgrading to the next level. That's just going, we're okay. The bridges aren't going to fall down right now. And he even shorted that. So instead of getting the $2.5 billion that they needed, they got, or the $3.5 billion they needed, they got $2.5 billion. So even if we do everything that he says we're going to do, we're still falling behind. Yeah, well, where's the money going to come from? Well, he did give away $2.5 billion a year in tax breaks to big corporations. There's a lot of money that we're leaving on the table and a lot of money that we're handing out. There are, again, coming back to priorities, a bunch of revenue streams that we could use to fund education and roads and actually not nickel and dime us through the back door. Well, he says. And this is one of the ones that goes, I just struggle. Well, he's taking on those state workers. Okay. You think that the reality is by him taking on those state workers, we now have 27,000 fewer education professionals. Is that what you mean by those greedy, evil state workers, the teachers that we got rid of because of the $3 billion in cuts? And he goes, well, no, I'm thinking about those people on the road who are standing holding up the shovels. Oh, interesting. The sad reality is a good majority of those folks, those are private contractors. I mean, we're building so much right now and doing so much. A lot of those are private contractors. You have private industry. And he's like, no, I love private industry. I go, well, that's that. So we began, he was stammering. He had nowhere left to go because he really thought he had me. And I'm going, well, this is the problem. Our mainstream corporate controlled media talks in sound bites. So when you have someone who's used to talking in sound bites because they can shut their friends down in an instant by saying, I know something, then they feel self bloated and they're able to take on anybody. And I said, I don't deal in sound bites. I actually want our Commonwealth, our country to move forward and in a way that brings everyone along and in a way that's sustainable and in a way that isn't going to harm my children in the future. And what's interesting is as much as we may have disagreed at the beginning, by the end of our 15-minute little jaunt back and forth through the world, we actually agreed on more than we disagreed on. And I find that to be the reality. I find that to be the case when you have an opportunity to break down those talking points and those sound bites, that people want the same things. Wow, who would have thought? And when you talk about what's going on in Washington, D.C. with all of the gridlock and the animosity and the partisanship, and you start examining who we're really talking about. Because look, I got to be honest, the oil companies, while they have all of this sway, average everyday folks like you and me, not so much. We get it. We see it. See it every day. And all we want are good neighborhoods for our kids to play in and good schools for our kids to get a good education in, an environment that's not going to kill them, and the opportunities that at least we had when we were growing up. Over the weekend, I spent some time thinking about, I'm getting old. I'm 47 isn't old, but I'm I'm looking back through the years, and you know, this weekend was one of those moments. I'm going to see a concert of a band I wanted to see back when I was in high school, and I never got the chance to see them. And I just, you know what, I'm gonna. They're in Allentown. We're gonna go on Wednesday, and we're gonna go out and see Judas Priest. Which, you know, again, you know, going back to, you know, being 13, 14 years old, going through high school, going yeah. I never had the chance to go. So a friend of mine, we're gonna drive out and see it, and it got me thinking about all the years and the things that you didn't get to do. And maybe it's just nostalgia, but maybe it's also, you know, thinking about what I want for my kids. And, you know, at this age and at this point, you know, I'm thinking about that a lot, because I'm looking at my daughter who's 12, and in a very, very short period of time, because it's been a blink of an eye getting to 12. In another blink of the eye, she's going off to college. In another blink of the eye, she's going to get married and have a family of her own. And what is she going to inherit from us? I mean, that's stuff that just weighs on my mind. You know, is the education she's getting, is that going to suffice her through her life? And what can I be doing now to make sure that her tomorrow is easier? And I think those are conversations that once you start talking to people across political aisles, we're all there. And we all think that way. And when you look at what's going on in Washington or in Harrisburg or in many of the state houses across this country, that divide is over, again, who gets what? But who gets what from the perspective of the very well-to-do and the very powerful demanding more and more and more for themselves. And then telling us government's bad and government's broken and government's dysfunctional. Well, government's dysfunctional. Why? Because they're heavily involved. When their interests trump our interests, I got a serious problem with that. And that's where we seem to find ourselves. And that's why I think tomorrow, 3 weeks from tomorrow, when you get up in the morning and you go and you cast your ballot, that's something we need to be thinking about. Pretty simple stuff. Quick break, right back.
So you might start represent. Say the USA is drowning in crafted lies. Say the USA have resumed ties it fine. Stop taking all our money and shipping it offshore. Do the job you're looking for.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
January of 1964 was a time to remember for many Americans. The Beatles released their first album. New York announced plans to build a World Trade Center. The Surgeon General announced smoking kills, and President Lyndon Johnson declared a war on poverty during his first State of the Union address. January 1964 was also a momentous year for the American truck drivers. The nation's truckers saw the first nationwide labor contract. The National Master Freight Agreement, covering some 450,000 truck drivers employed by 16,000 companies across the country, set a nationwide minimum wage of $3.33 per hour, or $23.63 in 2008 dollars, as well as providing health care and retirement benefits for all its members. The 1964 National Master Freight Agreement set a nationwide standard for working conditions, giving drivers a voice on the job and the power to stand up to abusive treatment, and eventually the ability to refuse to drive equipment the driver deemed unsafe. Led by labor visionary James R. Hoffa, this victory was the crowning achievement of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters as one of America's most influential unions. This landmark agreement created a framework for all national contracts to follow. Jimmy Hoffa, the man who famously quipped, "I may have many faults, being wrong is not one of them," was certainly right about the benefits, power, and influence of such a national agreement for workers, both union and non-union. Wages and benefits earned by truck drivers brought millions of hardworking men and women solidly into the middle class by rewarding hard work with a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. For generations, the National Master Freight Agreement served as the industry standard for all truck drivers, raising wages, improving benefits, and providing a safer workplace for drivers and the motoring public. Unfortunately, since the 1980 passage of trucking deregulation, The industry has resorted to cutthroat competition based on who is willing to work for less. In this environment, the National Master Freight Agreement has lost some of its power in lifting truck drivers out of low wage, no benefit, and hazardous conditions. Currently, many non-union truck drivers are earning at or near poverty wages while pushing legal limits. For many truckers, their pay is solely determined by the number of miles they drive. Breakdowns, time spent waiting to be loaded and unloaded, and other delays are shouldered by the driver, in most cases without compensation. 1964 and the years that followed has shown what can be accomplished by workers standing together. Perhaps the future will see resurgence in worker solidarity and the reemergence of a fair day's work, a fair day's pay. This Rick Smith Show Labor History Moment is brought to you by a grant from the Labor Education Center of IUP. For more information, go to www.thericksmithshow.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm John Kerr. Conservative media figures have criticized President Obama for sending the U.S. military to help address the public health crisis posed by Ebola in West Africa. On Fox's America's Newsroom, Fox military analyst Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters claimed,
"The president is a sincere pacifist, sincere one, and he thinks this anti-Ebola mission is exactly what our military should be doing, not fighting to defend our country. Sending 4,000 U.S. troops there, I just wouldn't do it. Just wouldn't do it."
Other right-wing media outlets, including Breitbart, The Blaze, and the National Review Online, also questioned whether the military should intervene. But as the Washington Post reported, quote, "The civilian response was never going to happen fast enough to catch up with the epidemic," and, quote, "Only the U.S. military had the capacity to move with enough speed and scale." For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous. The salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happy!
Working class heroes, they are the ones who helped to build this land. Working class heroes, they stay united, always hand in hand.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Of course, if you miss any portion of the program, you can download the podcast there at the website, or get the app on your smartphone. Take the program on the go. Just Google Play, iTunes, just look up The Rick Smith Show. It's right there. Easy. My wife even did it. So there you go. And it's nice when your wife's willing to take your program with you and go, oh, what's he talking about today? Even if she doesn't listen to all of it. But it's right there. Good for you. Today I walked into the local gas station just to pick up a couple of things before the program. And they have the newspaper right when you walk in the door. And the headline grabbed me. It's one of those things that just stopped me dead in my tracks that said, mid-state leaders want more religion. And I'm going, really? More? Don't you think we have kind of enough? And it got me thinking about, some of the really crazy stories that we've been seeing from some of these so-called religious leaders. And it got me thinking, is this really what I want my kids exposed to on a constant basis? The good stuff, absolutely. Be decent to your neighbors. Don't kill, don't steal, don't rape and pillage. I'm in line with that. But, this whole theocratic rule stuff to me is scary. And, on one vein, we can't have Sharia law. And I'm going, well, you want Christian rule. You want a sect of Christianity. Because, as I've always said, when we finally settle on that we're now a decided Christian nation and we're willing to write that down on paper, which sect? Which bit of it? And which bit of law do we pursue? Now, understand, the people who say they want more religion in government are the people who are call it what they are. The people who want to do away with abortion. They want to do away with gay marriage. They want the social extremes. And then there are some who want to take us back to, very decided, biblical, even back to the no wool for no two fabrics for you, young man. And it got me, wondering, is this what we really want in our political discourse? Or is it just doing things? Because I've often said, fine, all right, if we're going to do that, then let's start by, feeding the hungry and giving shelter to those who need the shelter and all of that. Are you going to do that? Are you going to heal the sick? Are you going to do what needs to be done in that vein? And the answer is no, they're not. What they're going to do is they're going to continue to enrich the handful at the expense of most of us. And, it's kind of scary stuff, because I don't know that I really want the extreme religious positions. I don't. And the more I look at this, the more I think about it, the more I have to be worried. And look, I've got teenage daughter. I've got a preteen daughter who's going to be doing and is doing the whole sex ed thing. I came across this letter written by a student in Singapore. And you go, oh, that's just Singapore. That's not here. Evidently, according to this girl's Facebook post, the crazy right-wing religious group Focus on the Family, or as I call them, Focus on Destroying the Family, they actually did a workshop in this girl's school. And I'm going, really? There? Aren't they doing enough buggering things up here? But according to this girl's letter, what Focus on Destroying the Family does is they give this sex ed talk, and it's like a 4-hour workshop, I guess, that comes with one of their classes. And as this girl is explaining it, there's a very 1950s feel to what they're preaching to these girls, to what they're preaching to these families, very 1950-ish type things. And she writes in the one part of it that, the beginning of it just caught my attention. She said, merely glancing through the booklet, I learned a simple yet important lesson, that bigotry is very much alive, and that it was naive of her to think she could be safe even in her own school from that kind of insanity. She claimed that the booklet actively served to promote the rape culture in her school. She said on the cover of it, and this is one of those things that scare me, because this is the mentality of these extremists. The mentality is well, women are the weaker sex. They're softer. They're less direct. They don't make up their mind. And according to what she wrote on the cover of the booklet, on the cover itself, it was written, no means yes, ? Yes means no, ? And she has a picture of it. She writes, the facilitators from Focus on the Family neglected to mention that a girl means yes when she says no is actually completely wrong. She said, rather, they spent their 4 hours with us discussing things such as what a girl really means when she says something else, as opposed to guys who are direct and always say what they mean. She said, granted, the facilitator did make it clear that these gender stereotypes that they were promoting were subject to some exception, and that they should be taken lightly as sort of a joke. And I started thinking about this and how I raise my kids. This is the religious view right here. This is the extreme This is Christian Sharia law right here. This is the extremists on the right wing of, because look, I consider myself a Christian, just not one of these insaniacs who are promoting this 1950s type mentality where women need to be in their place and my daughters need to be read. They don't actually speak their mind. You know, they really mean yes. I know they're screaming no at the top of their lungs, but they really mean yes. It's insane. It's really nuts. And she also points out that throughout the booklet that Focus on Destroying the Family put out, they they referred to girls or women as gals, and that gals are fragile and need guys to support them. And everything a guy does in a relationship is excusable simply because he is a guy and is wired that way. She writes, gals, it's written, need to be loved, can be emotional, want security, want you to listen to their problems, and want to look attractive. And validation of each of these things can only come from the support of a male. Now, I've talked about this in the past a number of times, that understand, as a male, and as something of an alpha male, so I'm told, this is the kind of world I would love to live in. I don't have to listen to anything women say. They're property to be taken, and they're dependent totally on the male form. In that world, you know, I could live. Problem is I would never allow my daughters to live in that world. I could never see them. And again, I hear you. Well, you would never allow it. No, I don't want my kids growing up in that kind of a world. While it may be short-term convenient and might be short-term a bloating to the ego, where do you start? And the problem is I don't know how Focus on Destroying the Family got into this school. And I don't know how they get into any schools. But when we start talking about we need more religion, this is their view. This is the extreme view. I don't want extremes. Do I want people to follow their faith and their conviction in their personal lives? Absolutely. But when you're in the public life, when you're in government, and you're working for we the people, not we the Christian people or the Muslim people or the Jewish people or the non-believing people, all of the people, I don't know that picking and choosing based on religious leaders' views is a good thing. I may be wrong, but I look at this world that the Focus on the Family people are pushing towards us, and I don't like it. And she goes on for pages on why, and good for her. Her parents, I hope, are extremely proud of her for being willing to stand up and say, this is ridiculous. And this garbage that we're being taught is ridiculous and shouldn't be here. She writes to finish it off, by engaging the services of groups such as Focus on Destroying the Family to teach sexuality education in schools, the management hence indirectly participates in promoting the rape culture, tells students that we should conform to traditional gender roles instead of being our own person, demonstrates that acceptance of diversity in peoples is unimportant, and erases minority groups in the student population. She writes to the school, I hope that these concerns will be taken into consideration for future events and workshops. And that's the hope. And I got to tell you, if that were my kid, I'd be proud as hell of her. Because I hope often that my kids and kids in general don't just take what's being shoveled at them, that they actually become living, breathing, thinking human beings. Quick break. Right back.
Turn out for what? Turn out for what?
I'm Darren, and I'm turning out for education.
I'm EJ, and I'm turning out for marriage equality.
My name is Lil Lena, and I'm turning out for reproductive rights.
Turn out for what?
Do you believe, sir, in global warming?
Senator Mitch McConnell dodges the climate change question.
So, gentlemen, we're now going to move to yes or no questions. Do you believe humans are contributing significantly to climate change?
Well, I've said all along climate is changing.
This is yes or no.
Look,
yes
this
or
is
Republican candidates retreat from climate denial. U.S. auto fleet achieves record fuel efficiency. Plus,
is regular clean enough for your family? Not when you can have clean coal clean.
Clean coal goes online in Canada. But there's a catch.
Say it ain't so. All of those catches and more straight ahead. For BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Senator, that's a yes or no question. Do you believe in global warming?
It is not a yes or no question.
Old boy came out a little defensive, a little ballsy, I think, with a little attitude.
a little bit of a jerk, maybe. Came across those.
Little bit of a jerk? Not my Senator Mitch McConnell. This is your Green News Report. Yep. Okay, Desi Doyen, so the climate change denialism from Republicans in the primaries is now coming back to haunt the Republicans in the generals.
Yep. But we'll have more on that in a moment. First, good news. The U.S. has hit a record for fuel efficiency. Despite 40 years of obstruction from the U.S. auto industry, the Obama administration in 2009 finally succeeded in setting higher mileage standards for cars and trucks so you don't have to buy so much gas. And now the Environmental Protection Agency announced this week that new cars and trucks sold in the U.S. have hit a record for fuel economy, 24 miles per gallon fleet-wide. And surprise, the auto industry did not collapse.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought that nobody wanted fuel-efficient cars and that it would, like everything else Republicans are concerned about, destroy the economy.
And again, they were wrong. Meanwhile, with the midterm elections less than 1 month away, finally, the corporate media has decided that climate change is now a thing and is asking about it in every major race. So, of course, now Republicans are backing off their earlier outright denial in the primaries, since now they have to appeal to voters in the general election. In Colorado, the Republican candidate for U.S. Senator, Representative Cory Gardner, tried retreat and evasion.
Do you believe humans are contributing significantly to climate change?
Well, I've said all along climate is changing.
This is yes or no.
Look,
yes
this
or
is
no.
an important issue, and I don't think you can say yes or
But
no.
you've got
to
60
important
seconds after.
I believe the climate is changing. I disagree to the extent that has been in the news that man has caused.
Congressman. And Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell of Kentucky evaded the question, too, with the old "I am not a scientist" dodge. And he did it twice in 1 week.
We can debate this forever. George Will had a column in the last year or so pointing out that in the 70s we were concerned that the Ice Age was coming. I'm not a scientist.
Yeah, neither is Fox News' George Will, by the way. And in the 70s, when there was a tiny handful of scientists concerned about an ice age, the majority of climate scientists were still worried about global warming that guys like Mitch McConnell pretend is not going on.
Now, that interview was with the Cincinnati Enquirer. McConnell did it again in a testy interview with Kentucky Sports Radio.
Do you believe, sir, in global warming?
What I have said repeatedly is I'm not a scientist, but what I can tell you is even if you thought that was important, and there's some scientists who do and some scientists who don't, but even if you thought that was important, the United States doing this by itself is going to have zero impact.
So do you, but that's a yes, Senator, that's a yes or no question. Do you believe in global warming?
It is not a yes or no question. I'm not a scientist.
I love the fact that he's not a scientist, but he is a scientist enough to know that doing anything about the problem will have no effect on the global climate. Go figure.
Yeah.
Mitch McConnell, occasional scientist.
Meanwhile, in an attempt to save the coal industry from its own pollution, the U.S. taxpayer has already spent over $5 billion on an experimental plant to capture carbon emissions from burning coal. That's commonly referred to as clean coal.
Clean coal harnesses the awesome power of the word clean.
Clean coal is supported by the coal industry, the most trusted name in coal.
Yes, it is.
Now, that expensive experimental plant in the U.S. is in Mississippi. But in Canada, the world's first carbon capture coal plant is now online. But there's a catch to these projects, as noted by Chris Hayes on MSNBC.
We will be actually selling the carbon dioxide to an oil company to help them take more petroleum out of the ground.
You heard that right. The carbon captured by this clean coal plant is going to facilitate oil drilling.
Hooray! By the way, kudos to Chris Hayes. You know, we have been beating up on the media for years for not covering climate change. And Chris Hayes has been doing all week a special on coal country with a lot of great stories and a lot of great interviews. So we should note when someone in the mainstream media actually gives this issue the coverage it deserves. For much more of the coverage it deserves, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. While you're there, please consider a donation to help the Green News Report stay on your public airwaves. Don't forget, you can find us and follow us on the Twitters and the Facebook at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Can you hear the death knell toll for old King Cole?
The proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
You hurt my friends, then you hurt my pride. I gotta be a man, I can't let it slide. I am a real American, fight for the rights of every man. I am a real American, fight for what's right, fight for your life.
So here's a perfect example. Sally sent me an email. Says, Rick, I don't know if you've seen this story from North Carolina. Evidently, a North Carolina public school teacher, a high school biology teacher, wrote a column for a homeschooling magazine. And she attached the article to the homeschooling magazine. Now, this is one of those interesting moments where you've got somebody who's working in the public school who truly doesn't believe in it and is pushing this idea of homeschooling, which I always find ironic that they're actually trying to put themselves out of work. And okay, you know, that's your choice, I guess. But here, this guy, his name is Ray Forner, and Ray writes an article saying flat out that public schools are like concentration camps, who are dedicated to the spiritual death of those imprisoned behind these walls. Now, the public high school biology teacher went on to complain about having to teach evolution, and that's where a lot of this comes from. Again, you know, I thought we were decided on that, and look, if you don't believe in evolution, there are a lot of things that I learned that I don't necessarily believe. What I was able to do is I was able to go, you know, I learned this in church and I learned this in science class, and let me see where this fits. And I'm okay with the idea of, actually, I'm kind of okay with teaching the creation thing in religion classes. You want they don't belong next to each other in science classes because creation is not a scientific theory. Evolution is. If you want to do the creation thing, there's a religion class for that. That's a religious thought. So let's keep it with that. Evidently, though, the good high school biology teacher has been suspended for 5 days because he agreed to it. He agreed that he exceeded his rights. He made some disruptive statements to public schools. Because how do you then go back to the kids in your class and go, you know, I've been teaching you this stuff, but I don't really believe it. And it's one of those things that's just kind of scary. And this is what gets me, is you get these extremists who then have to push their views down our throats. And I'm not even really against the idea as long as you're honest about it. You know, some of the best teachers I've ever had were really very radical. And they wanted you to expand your thoughts. You may not have agreed with the what's being presented. And this is my problem with homeschooling. The homeschool parents want their kids thinking the way they do, that very narrowly defined, this is all you need, here are your blinders. Again, I shouldn't speak in in broad generalities. In my experience of all the people that I've ever met who do the homeschooling, 90% of it comes down to religion. 90% of it comes down to what's in the book. The other 10% are people who don't want exposed to those people. So again, it's this narrow world. As where I think that, you know, The kids need that well-rounded experience, even if things that they don't agree with or I may not agree with. It's to open their mind. And what's interesting is, you look at all of the discussion around education and around funding. I mean, look here in this Commonwealth, 27,000 education professionals kicked to the curb. EPI just came out with a report here the other day. It was actually the 8th of October they came out with it. Pointed out that in September, public employment increased by 12,000 jobs, and that the growth was coming from local governments and also K through 12 education, librarians, teachers aides, stuff like that, guidance counselors. And what they were writing is this is a positive sign. Problem is, the number of teachers and education staffers fell dramatically because of the recession, and is nowhere near where it was pre-recession levels, let alone at the level that would be required to keep up with the expanding population. And what's going on is you've now got a gap in teachers. You're having this teacher gap because a lot of people didn't go into it. And look, I don't want my kids going into it. And they point out that, with the dismal trend in the public sector employment in general, about 250,000 public education jobs were lost in the Great Recession and its aftermath. Elise writes, if you add to that the number of public education jobs that should have been added simply by keeping up by the growth of enrollment, we currently experience a 377,000 job shortfall in local public education. They point out the cost of a significant teacher gap are measurable: larger class sizes, fewer teachers' aides, fewer extracurricular activities, and changes in the curriculum. So you've got this huge, this created crisis. And I asked about that, when Corbett cut the funding and cut those 27,000 people off, kick those people to the curb. You go, okay, you lost those 20,000 people. They're going to they're smart people. They're going to be absorbed into other jobs, and they're probably never coming back. They're not going to come back to education. But there's that next generation. Those 3 or 4 or 5 years or maybe 10 years of students, like my kids, when my daughter, she said she wanted to go into being a teacher. Oh, no, don't do that. So you lose that whole generation. And now I look in Allentown, which it looks like Allentown's going to be outsourcing their substitute teaching. Or some of it, I guess. So they're going to a private company that will supply them with substitute teachers for a cost, of course. You want to guess how much the premium for providing the school district with some of their substitute teachers? Just a mere 31%. So in order for them to go out and hire and recruit and find substitute teachers, who I can't imagine they're going to pay very well, it's going to cost the district 31% more than it would cost for them to do it themselves. And I sat back and I thought, is it just that they're lazy, or is it something else? Well, they're blaming Obamacare. Well, we don't want to have to, to do the juggling that it would take to keep them under the 30 hours. And I'm sitting here scratching my head because I guess other districts have done this. They've outsourced their substitute teachers. And the part of me that says eventually they're just going to want to outsource all of their teaching, and they want to run education. School districts want to run it like businesses have been running businesses for years, outsourcing portions of it to everybody else and having private vendors and contracts come in and do it and not actually have the actual control themselves. That's what it seems to me. Just very, very strange. And again, one of those questions of, is this the direction? Is this what defunding has done? And I mean, a 31% premium. I mean, that's almost a whole, I'm not the brightest bulb in the box, but that seems like a lot to me. Almost a third of your cost you're giving in profit. or so that the private company can create its own little bureaucracy. Very, very strange to me. But I guess that is the world that we live in. Let's take a quick break. Right back.
And sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
So you wake up in the morning just to work and fight yourself, and then somebody tells you that you're owned by someone else. So what's it all about? It's money! Work it out! The people of today so tired.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Gosh, time flies when it's pushed along by a jet stream of greed. It seems like only yesterday that Walmart executives announced with self-congratulatory fanfare the super-rich retailing colossus was not a Scrooge after all. Indeed, while the world's largest purveyor of stuff was not about to raise its poverty-level wages, it benevolently decided to provide a bare-bones health insurance plan to its 600,000 part-time employees, who make up nearly half of its total workforce. But quicker than you can spell avaricious, the $476 billion a year giant has now decided to renege, saying that as of January 1st, it will terminate coverage for employees who work less than 30 hours a week. Why that particular cutoff? Because also beginning next January 1st, people working less hours than that can apply for subsidized coverage from the public insurance exchanges created by our country's new Affordable Care Act. Yes, this means that super wealthy Walmart is piling the cost of its health care obligations onto the backs of its low-wage workers who might, or might not, be able to get a bit of a subsidy from us taxpayers. Walmart's slick honchos are effectively stealing a benefit meant to help low-income families, perverting it into a benefit for their own profiteering. But don't think they're Dickensian Scrooges coldly abandoning their employees. No, they say they're engaging a, quote, health coverage specialist to guide workers through the process of finding an insurance alternative. Of course, that will be the one financed by you and me. This is Jim Hightower saying, once again, the Waltons, the exploitative multi-billionaire heirs to the Walmart fortune, get the gold mine, while workers and taxpayers get the shaft. As the head of the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union said of this latest ripoff, it's shameful. But shameful is a core corporate value at Walmart.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Bringing sanity and rational thought back to America. Rick Smith.
Hey, it's your tomorrow. Right now, come on, it's everything. Right now, it's a magic moment. Do it right here and now.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So Linda sent me an email. If you want to know where the money for public education went, just follow this trail. Connect the dots, she writes. And she points out that, back in January, Governor Corbett announced a $30 million handout to Comcast. Understand, Comcast made, what was it? $10 billion? I mean, huge amounts of money. The priorities of $12 billion, actually, in 2012. And for the skyscraper that they're building, you go back and you just look at the money that's been handed to them. The state gave $30 million. The city gave them $10 million. Also, I guess, gave them even more, like another $4.5 million for quote unquote job creation. And you look at all this money that went into this this skyscraper, not to mention the past skyscrapers, but you look at all of this money and how we've been enriching these big companies for, I think, far too long. Do you think Comcast needs the $1 million we gave them? Do you think they need it? This is a company, like I said, $12 billion in profits. Do you think they even noticed $44 million? Do you think that had anything to do with it? With them building another skyscraper in Philadelphia? I don't think so. That $44 million could have been spent in the school district. Because oddly enough, now that I'm thinking about it, last Monday, when the SRC, the School Reform Commission there in Philadelphia, said we're going to tear up our contract with the teachers union and the teachers, and we're going to impose our will on the teachers, I seem to remember the $44 million number popping up, that they were going to steal $40 million from the health and welfare fund that they claimed the fund had that was saved up. And from everybody I talked to, that number is extremely inflated. But I seem to remember that $44 million number being thrown around. And it's one of those things that makes me kind of scratch my head and go, hold on a second. Wait a minute. Where'd that money go? And you stop and you think about the money that we bring in. And this is where I am a fiscal conservative. I want to know where every penny is spent. And I want to know, and I don't even know if conservative is the right. See, I don't want to give that politically to the political right wing, because I don't think it's one-sided. I don't believe it's a partisan issue to be fiscally responsible. I think that is a rational thought. And to say one political party or the other is more fiscally responsible in this day and age, it's kind of ludicrous. Because you've got one party who wants to spend money to invest in tomorrow, and we're going to take on debt, and maybe down the road it pays itself off, and we're going to invest and spend and get things moving. And then you've got to step over $1 to pick up a dime. And again, you go back to our transportation policy for all these years. What's actually happened to our transportation? Well, we've allowed it to crumble because we're saving money. We're being fiscally responsible. We're not spending money. Yeah, but if you don't fix what's going on, it costs you more. Ask anybody who never changed the oil in their car or never added any, we're saving money. We're not putting oil in the car. Doesn't last very long. Or the people who don't fix the hole in the roof. You don't fix the hole in the roof, what happens? The hole gets bigger. It doesn't take a genius to figure this out. It's not rocket science. But we've been told that's fiscally responsible. And I look at this and I got a question. You look at all of the money that we've spent giving quote unquote incentives or sweeteners or handouts or whatever you want to call them to these companies in the hopes that maybe possibly they'll consider creating jobs here. And I've been saying for years, and I will continue to say it, there has got to be a national policy, a national way of stopping it. A way to say, you know what? Sorry, if you pursue the beggar thy neighbor economic development, you lose federal funding somewhere. We've got to stop this killing ourselves. All the while we're creating an investor class that is enormous. I mean, that's the thing that gets me. When you look at, stop and think about this for a second. The Forbes 400 just came out. The 400 richest people in this country have a combined wealth of almost $3 trillion, $2.9 trillion, almost $3. That's about equal to the entire GDP of a country like Brazil that has 200 million people in it. You're talking about 400 individuals with almost $3 trillion worth of wealth. Now, I'm not being envious because we created this, and I guess there should be some national pride. We did this. Look at what our sacrifice has done. And that's the thing that gets me. We can't fund roads and bridges or school. Or look, Germany just made college free. Why can't we? Oh, I know, Rick, you're talking heresy. Talking heresy, you are. It's the end of the world. We better do something. Quick break, right back.
me and you, and I say to myself, what a wonderful world.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. The General Secretary of the 150 million-member Global Worker Federation, Industrial, is condemning Nissan for attacking workers' rights in Mississippi. Jacky Grimshaw and an international delegation of trade union leaders from Japan, France, Brazil, the UK, Spain, and South Africa met with Canton, Mississippi Nissan workers to hear firsthand about Nissan's anti-union actions. In an interview with Workers Independent News, Jacky Grimshaw said Nissan needs to stop violating worker rights and let American workers in Mississippi join their global counterparts in organizing a union.
Nissan is a major multinational company that makes multi-billion-dollar profits every year. It has the moral obligation and also the financial possibility to offer the Mississippi workers decent wages, reasonable working hours, safe workplaces, and the right to join the union, and this is what we want.
The Industrial delegation also stopped to talk with workers at the VW plant in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and at the Mercedes plant near Tuscaloosa, Alabama. New UAW locals have been formed at both plants. Reina says U.S. unions and global unions are intensifying their joint international efforts to organize workers and defend labor rights.
We are really building a new era of global solidarity. Several U.S. unions which are affiliated with Industrial, including the auto workers, the steel workers, and the machinists, they are engaging actively in our global work. And they understand that solidarity is a two-way street. At the same time as we are trying to achieve decent conditions in the U.S., the U.S. unions are also operating all over the world to support organizing in Asia, in Latin America, in Africa.
This is Mitch Lawrence with the Sports Minute for Workers Independent News. We're in the middle of football season, and suddenly in the state of New Jersey, no one is talking about games or rankings or whether Geno Smith of the Jets should be benched because he missed a team meeting out in San Diego the other day. No, nearly everyone is talking about a town in central New Jersey called Sayreville, located about 45 miles from Manhattan. The other day, they canceled the rest of the football season for the high school team in Sayreville because of what is being viewed largely as a hazing scandal. But when you read the allegations of what the upperclassmen were doing to their 14-year-old freshman teammates, you can come to only one conclusion. This is a massive sexual assault case. There's a criminal investigation taking place, and we sincerely hope that the perpetrators are prosecuted to the fullest. The coaching staff that apparently looked the other way at these alleged crimes also needs to be held responsible in some way as well. We do have some heroes emerging. They're the parents who have come forward to expose what their sons have gone through in the darkened locker room, the kinds of things no one should have to endure. Not in Sayreville, New Jersey, or any place else. With a Sports Minute for Workers Independent News, this is Mitch Lawrence.
Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for an American comeback. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Power Professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Rebuilding America. The Rick Smith Show.
Yes, they do, especially when you are driving a frac truck, 4,200 gallons of who knows what over a 136-year-old bridge that has a 3-ton weight limit. When you decide that you're going to take, some 42,000-pound vehicle over a 3-ton limit bridge, are you surprised that the bridge collapses? This is what happens when you have 19th century infrastructure meeting 21st century fracaholics, and the bridge doth collapse. And guess what they did as the truck was sitting on the bridge? They just opened up the valves, and whatever was in the tanker, now in your water supply. So, hey, good stuff. And this is what we're told is progress. Anyway, welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. You may remember last month, we talked about the Jobs to Move America plan, this idea that we were going to harness about $4.4 billion in transportation spending, create about 53,000 new jobs across the country, and get us moving, into the 21st century. Just kind of a thought. And I thought this is what I've been talking about for years, and it's what we should be focusing on every single day, which is why I've asked Jacky Grimshaw. She is the Vice President for Policy at the Center for Neighborhood Technology, CNT.org, the website. Jacky, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you, Rick. And just as you brought me on, I have to clear my throat. So excuse me 1 second. That was all about. I just assured you I was all well.
Well, good for you. So here we are. We've got this incident a couple of days ago here in Pennsylvania, where you got this, the new technology. We're running across these bridges that are 136 years old. We've got some 5,500 bridges that are structurally deficient, and we've got a governor who said, "Well, we're going to underfund repairing them," and that's just not a Pennsylvania problem, is it?
No, that's a problem across the country. One of the things that our economy relies on our transportation system, but it seems like it's an afterthought when it comes to investing in that transportation system. And whether or not it's highway or transit or inner city rail, it's always an afterthought. And, without transportation, we're dead. Just look at what happened to the country after 9/11. The transportation system shut down, whether or not you're talking about planes or trains or highways or access to cities. We were just stymied until we got past that kind of catastrophe. And, whether or not we have Hurricane Sandy or whether or not we have bridge collapsing like you're talking about in Pennsylvania, or what happened on the Mississippi up in Minnesota a few years ago, transportation infrastructure is extremely important. Yeah, and we need to change our mindset.
Well, I don't think we, the people, need mindset changing. I think we need political leaders who need mindset changing. I think we need to give these elected officials the courage and the backing to do what I think most of us agree on. We want good transportation systems. I want to be able to get on a train and go from where I live in Harrisburg to Washington, D.C. Good luck on that. We just don't have that infrastructure.
Well, Rick, I think we agree. I think, it's the political will to make the big choices. I think our politicians believe that they're elected to office for life and never take a stand that may in any way cause them to worry about or risk their elected positions. So we need to have a change in the mindset of our public officials. I agree with you.
Yeah, but I look at this and again, you say, well, and this is where I give Republicans credit. They have done a masterful job of convincing us that we're broke, that the nation doesn't have any money, and we can't do big things anymore. And that to me is one of those things that I always thought made America exceptional, that we thought big and we did things big. I mean, I don't know that we could go to the moon today if in this climate, let alone build a road or a bridge.
Well, one of the things, Rick, is that, we have the people make the decision on who the elected officials are. And so we are responsible. I mean, we get what we deserve when we put in office people who can't think big, people who do think small, people who do look at the negative. The glass is half empty rather than the glass is half full. So in a lot of ways, unless we take responsibility as citizens and start electing folks who will make the kind of decisions that we believe in, we'll be fighting this uphill battle. And it's every congressional district, every aldermanic or city council district, every mayor, every governor, all of those positions, all of those elected positions are in some ways contributing to the sad state of our affairs. And so we need to rise up as citizens and make some changes.
Absolutely. And we're going to have that chance 3 weeks from tomorrow to make sure you get out on November 4th and cast your ballot. And this should be one of those issues, front and foremost, should be when you get out to the town halls and they come around shaking hands and kissing babies, this should be one of the questions on the list. So let's talk big. What's the vision? I mean, my problem is I've heard too few people talk about what the vision of tomorrow is going to be. We're just too busy patchworking today. What's the big picture?
Well, here in Chicago, we have a great big vision. New York City has a very terrific expanded transit system. Chicago has a pretty good one, but there's still large areas of our region that is without good rail transit or even bus rapid transit to get people to jobs. Now we're talking about, jobs, right? and transportation and how important that is for economic development. But unless you have the ability for people to get to jobs in a reasonable amount of time, say, if you spend more than an hour commuting, you're spending too much time commuting.
Exactly.
And so too many people have to spend too much time on highways because they have no transportation choices. And so here in Chicago, we're working on a campaign that we're calling Transit Future, and it's about how do we provide the funding that will allow us to build out our transit system so that more people have access to get to jobs, to get to school, to get to hospitals or appointments without having to spend an hour and a half, 2 hours on the expressway.
Yeah, or just getting across town to visit a friend or go to a park or go visit the Bean. I love Chicago.
You love my Bean down here, huh?
I did we spent a week in Chicago with my daughter over the summer for a convention, and we spent time at the Bean, and she just absolutely loved it. But even just to get around, I mean, to me, that's what's important. It's about how we're moving people. And I know there are some who go, I'm never going to take transportation, public transportation. They say, well, good, don't. I will. And this should make you happy because I won't be in front of you in traffic.
That's exactly right. So whether or not you drive or you bike or you walk or you take transit, this is something that is going to be a benefit to everyone. And, the way we like to look at things is out of our own self-interest, right? So if you're a driver that you don't want to travel any way except walk from your house to your driveway and from the parking lot to your job or whatever, fine. But a lot of other folks would rather put the money that it's costing us to operate that vehicle into saving for a vacation, saving for our children's education, saving for upgrade of the house, right? That we're putting money into something that is going to appreciate over time rather than continue to depreciate that we get when we have automobiles as our primary mode of transportation.
So let me ask you this, because, I've had these conversations with a number of folks here in my area, because there was a plan to do light rail from where I live in a suburb of Harrisburg to get light rail into Harrisburg. And they're, no, it just costs too much. And, we don't want to have to pay for it with our tax dollars. And it came back to this idea that it would never turn a profit. Do you think this is stuff that has to be profit motivated, that this is something, because I'm of the mindset that it's just part of the commons, that this is what we should be doing just as a matter of course, not because it makes money. I'm curious your thought.
Well, that person that was objecting to the rail because it would cost too much money and it didn't turn a profit, ask him how many profits have been turned on highways. Now, you're talking about Pennsylvania and all your toll roads I've been through on the Pennsylvania toll road. And, is that generating a profit? Is it just creating enough money to keep us from falling apart? Transportation infrastructure, whether or not it's transit or highways, are really about the investment and what that contributes, the benefits that it contributes to our economy. I don't know how many times I can stress that, is that this is the way we get economic benefit. Why did President Eisenhower propose the interstate highway system in the first place?
Well, we were told
tanks moving across the country, right? But what it really did, it would link up various markets so that we can move goods and commerce across the country more efficiently, right? And so that's what it did. And so it's the economic benefit that we got from the interstate highway system. We never had one tank that's rolled on it yet, as far as I know, at least not in a serious way. But the transit system can provide the same kind of benefit because it provides people with choices. I don't know, Rick, if you've experienced people who've been stuck on the highway for 2 hours. And they come into the office and they're all frazzled and, they want to snap at you and you've done nothing wrong, but they're angry at the guy who cut them off on the highway, right? It creates all that stress in our life. So, that is a health benefit, a health cost that gets generated by people having to spend too much time on highways. I'm
Jacky,
sorry, I would let you get that word in. I'll shut up.
Well, no, I was a truck driver for years. I've spent 1 million miles on the highways and byways. I've sat in my share of traffic, especially going into major cities like New York, where you sit 2, 3, 4 hours waiting to get across the George Washington Bridge, or if Chris Christie shuts down a lane, could be 6 or 8 hours. And as I said back then, when the whole bridge scandal happened, I said they should just put Christie at the nearest truck stop, and if he can make it out, I forgive him.
I hear you. But you get my point. If you've experienced having to sit and the stress that goes with having to be on the highway for hours on end. You know, how productive are you as an employee if you have to get into the office after being stuck on the George Washington Bridge for 4 hours?
Yep.
You know, not very. But on the other hand, if you're able to take transit across the river, you know, to get to the other side, then, you know, you've read your newspaper, you've done your homework, you prepared for your day, you maybe had a little nap or whatever, and you get to the office in a much better physical, stress-free mode than having been stuck on the George Washington for 2 hours.
And the other part of it is it's still better for the environment, and even more importantly than just the environment, it also creates a lot of jobs in the building and the maintaining and all of that goes into it.
You couldn't be further. I mean, you know, Chris, Rick, that's one of the things that we have been stressing with our transit project here in Chicago, is that it has all kinds of benefits. It has the benefit of getting people around more efficiently. It has the benefit of the environment. It has the benefit of creating jobs, you know, and one of the things that we did an analysis, we CNT did a few years ago when President Obama first put out the stimulus package, is that we evaluated the jobs that were created by the transit projects across the country versus those that were created by the highway project. And more jobs were created from the transit projects that came out of the stimulus than were created by the highway projects. And so, you know, the benefit of doing this, you know, it hits a whole bunch of different areas, whether or not, you know, we're talking about any one of the various factors that we look at in terms of our whole quality of life.
Right.
Transit does a much better job than highways.
Now, let me ask you this. Do you think, you know, I grew up in Cleveland, which was a very segregated city. And in fact, as a child, I grew up in a housing project on the west side where we weren't on the bus line. We weren't near, we were within a couple mile walking distance of the rapid transit, but we weren't initially on the bus line, which, as I'm sure you know, closes a whole bunch of opportunities to jobs and other things. But I remember as a kid, you know, thinking, you know, why aren't we all connected to this stuff? Because that is the way to get to the lower end of the socioeconomic scale, those people opportunities to rise up. So I guess the question that I have is that the point that, you know, there's a thought that we really don't want to extend that because we don't want to deal with those people. I'm curious your thought.
Well, you know, that's one of the things that came up when Washington was building out their system. The folks in Georgetown didn't want to have a transit system there. The MARTA in Atlanta, same thing. You know, people were afraid that, you know, those people would ride the train out there and steal their TV. Well, I like to see how many people stealing TVs are riding back on transit, right? I mean, it's just kind of ridiculous, the things that come out of people's mouths, you know, and they use any kind of excuse as a way of preventing something that they don't understand, or that guy told you, you know, transit too expensive, you know, and won't turn a profit. You know, those are ridiculous statements that are uneducated statements, because if you look at the facts, you know, in an educated society, we ought to be looking at the facts, is that it is much better for you to, your community there in Cleveland, to be connected by a transit line to get those folks to work, because if people are working, that means they're not relying on public assistance of any sort. And they can be generating an income, which means they can be spending it in the community, which means it raises the turnover of dollars in the community, which then creates more jobs, right? So if you look at, you know, step by step, getting people who need jobs to where jobs are is a benefit to the overall society.
That sounds like good stuff. Where do we start? Where do we go? How do we do it? Lead me down the path.
Well, you can do what we're doing here in Chicago. One is that you build a coalition of folks who understand, as you say, that we the people understand how important transportation is. And what we are doing is building a coalition so that we can convince our elected officials that this is something that we want. We are willing to pay ourselves. You know, we're willing to tax ourselves in order to expand transit in Cook County. And so we're building the coalition so that we can share that the view of the public. You know, here I think in Chicago, just like in Pennsylvania, we're unlike the West Coast where you can go to the public and you get a binding referenda to raise taxes. We can't do that. We have to have our elected officials, you know, give us a revenue stream so that we can do things that we think are important. And transit is one of the things that we think are important. And we want our elected officials to invest in transit, not to invest in a lot of other things that they think is better for them rather than for us. So we're building the coalition. We have a projects that have gone through our long range transportation, long range planning process for transportation by our metropolitan planning organization. So we have the projects. These are projects that were vetted. Only thing they lacked was money, and so we get this revenue stream from our elected officials. Then we can go ahead and start the process of building out our transit system. So the next time you bring your daughter to Chicago, you'll be able to get to a lot of other places. For example, you may have gone to Lincoln Park Zoo because you get there very easily in the city of Chicago. But getting to Brookfield Zoo, which is a larger zoo, which is a lot more opportunities for kids to experience nature and different kinds of animals, you can't get there on transit. So if we can build out the system, then you'll be able to go to Brookfield Zoo as well as the Lincoln Park Zoo the next time you come to Chicago.
There you go. We'll hit up both zoos because the reality is I think poll after poll has shown us that taxpayers are willing to raise their own taxes to fund public transportation. I've seen a bunch of polls. The last one I remember was like more than 2/3 of the people who were polled, and I think it was the National Research Defense Council who did it. I think it was 2/3 of the people would increase their taxes to pay for the option and the choice of public transportation.
Well, in Los Angeles, more than 2/3 of the people actually did that. 68% of the folks in Los Angeles voted to increase their sales tax by 0.5 cent to build out their transit system.
There you
go.
go.
So that's the other thing that I'm telling folks here in Chicago. You want Los Angeles to be second city yet again? Right now, they've took over the second city position in terms of population. They're still behind us in terms of transit, but if they're building out their system, they may be number 2 in transit too. So how does that make you feel, Chicago?
There you go.
Got to have a little competition in there, Rick,
Yeah, hey, throw it out there, whatever it takes. But Jacky, I appreciate you taking time for us, and I'd love to talk to you again at some point as this continues down the road, so to speak.
All right. Well, you got my number. Call me anytime.
All righty. Jacky Grimshaw, Vice President of Policy at the Center for Neighborhood Technology, CNT.org, the website. There's also a couple other links there at the website, thericksmithshow.com. I'll just click on Jacky's name. It'll take you to the links to get an idea of what they're doing in Chicago and what the vision is. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Together, we can make America better. The Rick Smith Show.
January of 1964 was a time to remember for many Americans. The Beatles released their first album. New York announced plans to build a World Trade Center. The Surgeon General announced smoking kills, and President Lyndon Johnson declared a war on poverty during his first State of the Union address. January 1964 was also a momentous year for the American truck drivers. The nation's truckers saw the first nationwide labor contract. The National Master Freight Agreement, covering some 450,000 truck drivers employed by 16,000 companies across the country, set a nationwide minimum wage of $3.33 per hour, or $23.63 in 2008 dollars, as well as providing health care and retirement benefits for all its members. The 1964 National Master Freight Agreement set a nationwide standard for working conditions, giving drivers a voice in the job and the power to stand up to abusive treatment, and eventually the ability to refuse to drive equipment the driver deemed unsafe. Led by labor visionary James R. Hoffa, this victory was the crowning achievement of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters as one of America's most influential unions. This landmark agreement created a framework for all national contracts to follow. Jimmy Hoffa, the man who famously quipped, "I may have many faults, being wrong is not one of them," was certainly right about the benefits, power, and influence of such a national agreement for workers, both union and non-union. Wages and benefits earned by truck drivers brought millions of hardworking men and women solidly into the middle class by rewarding hard work with a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. For generations, the National Master Freight Agreement served as the industry standard for all truck drivers, raising wages, improving benefits, and providing a safer workplace for drivers and the motoring public. Unfortunately, since the 1980 passage of trucking deregulation, the industry has resorted to cutthroat competition based on who is willing to work for less. In this environment, the National Master Freight Agreement has lost some of its power in lifting truck drivers out of low wage, no benefit, and hazardous conditions. Currently, many non-union truck drivers are earning at or near poverty wage while pushing legal limits. For many truckers, their pay is solely determined by the number of miles they drive. Breakdowns, time spent waiting to be loaded and unloaded, and other delays are shouldered by the driver, in most cases without compensation. 1964 and the years that followed has shown what can be accomplished by workers standing together. Perhaps the future will see resurgence in solidarity and the reemergence of a fair day's work, a fair day's pay. This Rick Smith Show Labor History Moment is brought to you by a grant from the Labor Education Center at IUP. For more information, go to www.thericksmithshow.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
There have been served as President of the United States without ever getting elected to the office. It doesn't seem like a big number, but it's about 1 out of every 9 presidents. The first was John Tyler, elected to serve as William Henry Harrison's vice president in 1840. Harrison had defeated incumbent President Martin Van Buren using the slogan, "Tippecanoe and Tyler too," but he died of pneumonia just a few weeks into his term. This was a first for the country, and there was informal debate as to whether the vice president was to be a caretaker without the full power of an elected president. But Tyler didn't wait on an answer. He forcefully took over the reins, and one of his lasting legacies was establishing that an ascending VP would be cloaked with the full power of the office. Join us again for Millard Fillmore. This is Clinton Porter at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
Rebuilding America. The Rick Smith Show.
With the horns, the walls came down. They'd all been won, but the walls came down. I don't think there are any Russians. There ain't no Yanks. Just corporate criminals. Whatever it takes.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Yeah, that's one of the things. I found it funny. She goes, "Oh, I don't know who told you. What kind of an idiot would have told you that it's too expensive?" He was actually a county commissioner, and it just kind of make me laugh. And the one Democratic county commissioner at that years ago, because they were going to put that, they were talking about Corridor 1, which would have linked up where I live in Carlisle to Harrisburg. Which would have then, the way as I understood it, would have then led to a web of other tentacles out to other areas, which would have given you the ability to at least move around the region on public transportation if you needed to. Now, I understand now they've got a bus coming out to the Carlisle area, which is a good thing. The Capital Area Transit sending a bus out, but it's still not that dedicated run that they were talking about, which would have taken the traffic off the road as well. They were going to use the old railroad bridge, which we talked about in the past. Again, it comes down to that vision, though. And the problem is we've got too many tip-of-the-nose politicians who don't look to that, to what tomorrow is going to be. Yeah, our roads are maybe possibly handling the traffic we have now, but what's 10 or 20 years hold? And understand, these projects, they just don't happen. There's a whole planning process and a whole legal battle process that it just doesn't pop up, and we don't have the ability on a policy level like that just to turn the dime and go. It's one of those things that it's kind of, it takes, and I think she's right, it takes you, it takes me, it takes us voting, And in 3 weeks from tomorrow, you're going to have that chance. And when you go to the polls, remember, what did Governor Corbett do in the last 3.5 years? What is his legacy? What did he do to help transportation? Well, he underfunded it. And it took to the 11th hour, years into his term to do it. They just passed the last year, and we missed the construction season last year. It was this spring was the beginning of the construction season that was possible. And you think about out of the Great Recession, those jobs could have been used 3 years ago. We could have used that vision, just didn't have it. And that's why I think come 3 weeks from tomorrow, when you go pull that lever, you got to remember that. It is what it is. Quick break, right back.
Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
Do you believe, sir, in global warming?
Senator Mitch McConnell dodges the climate change question.
So, gentlemen, we're now going to move to yes or no questions. Do you believe humans are contributing significantly to climate change?
Well, I've said all along climate is changing.
This is yes or no.
Look,
yes
this
or
is
Republican candidates retreat from climate denial. U.S. auto fleet achieves record fuel efficiency. Plus,
is regular clean enough for your family? Not when you can have Clean Coal Clean.
Clean coal goes online in Canada. But there's a catch.
Say it ain't so. All of those catches and more straight ahead. For BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Senator, that's a yes or no question. Do you believe in global warming?
It is not a yes or no question.
Old boy came out a little defensive, a little ballsy, I think, with a little attitude.
a little bit of a jerk, maybe. Came across those.
A little bit of a jerk? Not my Senator Mitch McConnell. This is your Green News Report. Yep. Okay, Desi Doyen, so the climate change denialism from Republicans in the primaries is now coming back to haunt the Republicans in the generals.
Yep. But we'll have more on that in a moment. First, good news. The U.S. has hit a record for fuel efficiency. Despite 40 years of obstruction from the U.S. auto industry, the Obama administration in 2009 finally succeeded in setting higher mileage standards for cars and trucks so you don't have to buy so much gas. And now the Environmental Protection Agency announced this week that new cars and trucks sold in the U.S. have hit a record for fuel economy, 24 miles per gallon fleet-wide. And surprise, the auto industry did not collapse.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought that nobody wanted fuel-efficient cars and that it would, like everything else Republicans are concerned about, destroy the economy.
And again, they were wrong. Meanwhile, with the midterm elections less than 1 month away, finally, the corporate media has decided that climate change is now a thing and is asking about it in every major race. So, of course, now Republicans are backing off their earlier outright denial in the primaries, since now they have to appeal to voters in the general election. In Colorado, the Republican candidate for U.S. Senator, Representative Cory Gardner, tried retreat and evasion.
Do you believe humans are contributing significantly to climate change?
Well, I've said all along climate is changing.
This is yes or no.
Look,
yes
this is an important issue, and I don't think you can say yes or no.
But you've got 60 seconds after.
I believe the climate is changing. I disagree to the extent that has been in the news that man has caused.
And Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell of Kentucky evaded the question, too, with the old "I am not a scientist" dodge. And he did it twice in 1 week.
We can debate this forever. George Will had a column in the last year or so pointing out that in the 70s we were concerned that the Ice Age was coming. I'm not a scientist.
Yeah, neither is Fox News' George Will, by the way. And in the 70s, when there was a tiny handful of scientists concerned about an ice age, the majority of climate scientists were still worried about global warming that guys like Mitch McConnell pretend is not going on.
Now, that interview was with the Cincinnati Enquirer. McConnell did it again in a testy interview with Kentucky Sports Radio.
Do you believe, sir, in global warming?
What I have said repeatedly is I'm not a scientist, but what I can tell you is even if you thought that was important, and there's some scientists who do and some scientists who don't, but even if you thought that was important, the United States doing this by itself is going to have zero impact.
So do you, but that's a yes, Senator, that's a yes or no question. Do you believe in global warming?
It is not a yes or no question. I'm not a scientist.
I love the fact that he's not a scientist, but he is a scientist enough to know that doing anything about the problem will have no effect on the global climate. Go figure.
Yeah.
Mitch McConnell, occasional scientist.
Meanwhile, in an attempt to save the coal industry from its own pollution, the U.S. taxpayer has already spent over $5 billion on an experimental plant to capture carbon emissions from burning coal. That's commonly referred to as clean coal.
Clean coal harnesses the awesome power of the word clean.
Clean coal is supported by the coal industry, the most trusted name in coal.
Yes, it is.
Now, that expensive experimental plant in the U.S. is in Mississippi. But in Canada, the world's first carbon capture coal plant is now online. But there's a catch to these projects, as noted by Chris Hayes on MSNBC.
We will be actually selling the carbon dioxide to an oil company to help them take more petroleum out of the ground.
You heard that right. The carbon captured by this clean coal plant is going to facilitate oil drilling.
Hooray! By the way, kudos to Chris Hayes. You know, we have been beating up on the media for years for not covering climate change, and Chris Hayes has been doing all week a special on coal country with a lot of great stories and a lot of great interviews. So we should note when someone in the mainstream media actually gives this issue the coverage it deserves. For much more of the coverage it deserves, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. While you're there, please consider a donation to help the Green News Report stay on your public airwaves. Don't forget, you can find us and follow us on the Twitters and the Facebook at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Can you hear the death knell song for old King Cole?
Yeah, you're looking for experience. You're looking for someone with a proven track record. When the climate changed about man-made global warming in this country, and everybody rushed to say, oh, we need to do something now about this huge problem. I didn't change. I stood tall and said, this is the end. This climate science and man-made global warming was not climate science, it was political science.
This is the end. My only friend, the end.
I got to tell you, I miss Tricky Ricky. I miss Santorum. I can't wait for the 2016. Can't wait for the crowd to come out and say, I want to be president. I hope Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, just like 2012, I hope they're back. And I hope Santorum's right at the front of it, leading the charge of more head in the sand, deny everything, and be afraid of everything else. I've been looking, and if anyone's seen a statement by Rick Santorum on Ebola, I'm dying for it. Anyway, our quote of the day comes from Dr. Francis Collins. You know, an actual doctor guy who actually knows something. He's the head of the National Institutes of Health. Evidently, he told Huffington Post, the NIH has been working on Ebola vaccines since 2001. It's not like we suddenly woke up and thought, oh my gosh, we should have something ready here. He says, frankly, had we not gone through a 10-year slide in research support, we probably would have had a vaccine in time for this and what we've gone through. We've gone through the clinical trials and would have been ready. Except we've had a decade of starve the beast. We've had a decade of drag it into the bathtub and drowned it. And this is kind of what you get when you bury your head in the sand. So here to talk a little bit about the end of the world, which I guess is the Ebola. I've asked Tina Dupuy. She is the nationally syndicated columnist, investigative journalist, award-winning writer, stand-up comedian, comic, all kinds of stuff, all that and a bunch more. Tina, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
So I look at the Rick Santorums of the world and all of these people with their heads in the sand, that the end of the world's coming. We're all going to be left behind, and it's the gays and it's all this other stuff that's going to kill us.
Well, here's where we need to thank our lucky stars, because you'll remember the East Coast had a little earthquake not too long ago, and immediately Michelle Bachmann came out and said, we had this earthquake because God is trying to tell us to cut government spending. Well, what they're not doing with the Ebola crisis is saying what we really need to do is cut government spending. What conservatives are doing now is saying we should have spent way more and better than we had.
Yeah.
Which is really kind of changing the conversation. But at the end of the day, this is just scaremongering by the numbers. The same people who are trying to freak people out about Ebola are the same people who were calling H1N1 the fajita flu. We love to make the other into someone who's carrying disease and possibly over an open border. I mean, you know, the Ebola patient came from a plane, but suddenly that was a great excuse to talk about closing the border and building a bigger wall. You know, this is stuff that they pretty much come up with the exact same arguments they've come up with and the exact same talking points that they've had, you know, from monkeypox on up.
Yeah.
They don't have a lot of credibility with warning us about what really is important. What we have been doing in the last decade, where we haven't been figuring out how to vaccinate for Ebola, is we've been building a $1 trillion embassy in Iraq. We've been dumping our money overseas. There was a story that came out today from the Washington Post that the Department of Defense basically scrapped a bunch, it was something crazy, like $200 million worth of equipment, just kind of sent to the scrapyard instead of reselling it. This has been, when it comes to dumping money overseas, money's never been an object. We've put it on the credit card. We've moved things around on our roster and been able to maintain now decades-long wars, two of them on two different fronts, for all intents and purposes, never really ended. And then we are all kind of shocked when a bridge collapses, or we have one of our major cities basically buckle because of a storm, or we have an outbreak of an incredibly scary contagion in a state where the governor doesn't believe in science.
Yeah. And the question that I have,
and also has the highest uninsured people in the country. There's over 5 million Texans who don't have insurance, and it's because of Rick Perry.
Yeah, and as I understand it, the guy who died from this actually didn't have insurance either, right?
I actually don't know that. I mean, he was not an American citizen. He came over. He was a Liberian.
Yeah, this was a guy who didn't have insurance, and as was explained to me, they actually sent him away for the reason that he didn't have insurance.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, this is really, you know, Texas has has a real issue when it comes to healthcare. You know, you have Rick Perry, who just kind of arbitrarily on his own doesn't want poor people to get healthcare coverage. He's turning down federal money to insure poor people. The highest rate in the country. Not just that there are more Texans than other states who are saying no to the federal money that is allotted for Obamacare, but also it has the highest rate among the red states. I mean, Texas is worse than Alabama, if you could imagine, in the amount of uninsured. So yeah, this is kind of like wondering why there's a forest fire after there hasn't been rain for all year. You know, this was right to really hit Texas very viscerally. And even if there are only, now there's been one death, but if the fatality rate doesn't go above what it is right now, it still hit people in this very real way, where we have not prepared. We've not thought of the right things. We've been too busy hearing people talk about Benghazi and the things that are largely imagined, than actually having a real conversation about, you know, how we need to protect ourselves. And one is to have sick people have insurance so they don't get a fever. And I was writing about this a couple of weeks ago. People who don't have insurance, they get a fever, and you know what they do? They don't go to the ER, because the idea of being financially impacted of not being able to go to work or whatever is much scarier than
It's devastating.
Ebola.
Yeah, it's devastating.
Yeah.
And, the thing is not even just going to the ER. It's like we do at the Smith household. We call the family doctor and say, hey, you know what? I've got a fever. One of the kids have a fever. Can we swing by and have you take a look at it? You pay the $10 deductible, you move on. I think that's security that every citizen in this country should have.
Absolutely, because what happened before Obamacare was when people got sick, and I ended up in an emergency room. I was in a car accident, and I was talking to the doctors and the nurses. This was a couple of years ago, and there was a kind of an underclass of people who only got their health care from the ER. So it was really expensive, and they knew that they were never going to pay that bill, so they just kind of kept racking up debt. They would never be able to own a home. They would never be able to buy a car, go to college, or have any of those other kind of financial stability, that financial security in their life. They were basically like indebted to their bad health. And that is what Obamacare is kind of taking. We hope when in the states where people are actually, that governors have the foresight to actually take the federal money to do this kind of thing. That's one of the things that Obamacare was supposed to ward off.
Yeah, but I look at this and I look at all of the disaster. I look at things through the frame of how much money can be made through disaster. Granted, we didn't do anything to make sure that New York wasn't going to get hit by this giant storm. So you had all this disaster, all the money made out of that. There's part of me that goes, the situation with Ebola, there's somebody going, if it hits, we can make a ton of money if we're the first one to get this vaccine. And then we just do it like with the Tamiflu. If you remember that, it was almost impossible to get Tamiflu when they scared the hell out of us over the bird flu. To me, I look at the moneyed interests behind this stuff that's shoving this down our throats, because that's what it seems to me. It's all about who profits and who pays.
If that kind of fear gets people to actually create an Ebola vaccine and that saves lives, then great. Right now, we're not even looking at that. Right now, it was something that didn't have a monetary value to it, and so it kind of fell by the wayside.
That's because it was happening over there. It was happening somewhere else. Now that they can say there's something here, be afraid. Now the money, I see the money is going to start rolling. I guarantee it. The money will roll.
Right. And then there's also the other aspect of it, this kind of this exotic place with we already have, the right wing has already tried to make us afraid of foreigners and make us afraid of brown people and people invading this country and people being used as essentially to care. There's been this myth, and this actually goes back about 2,000 years of a kind of, it's known as the blood libel, of kind of slandering a group of people with this myth that they are carrying a disease, right? That the Jews were exiled from Egypt. The rumor had it because they were lepers, and so this is something that every group of new people has had to endure. And the right wing has been really adept at making people scared of Mexican immigrants because they're going to come over and they're going to have some biological warfare. They're going to have some biological agent, and we're going to have an outbreak of whatever because we, allowed a Mexican national to walk over our border, or if we let people come here and we don't become xenophobic and close up our borders, then it's somehow going to impact us. So they've been kind of saying this for so long that anything that even remotely kind of resonates with that kind of myth suddenly becomes all they can talk about it. So the Ebola is really hitting all of the marks. There's somebody from Africa, which the president has his father was from, so they get to latch onto that. They get to scare people with something that they already are concerned about, like the foreigners coming over here with some kind of weird disease, and they get to talk about Obama failing to allegedly to protect us.
Trifecta.
So they kind of this. Yeah, exactly. So it's really a story that the right wing has been able to kind of dig their teeth in, and then and then use Benghazi as a comma. It's it's pretty formulaic.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you're still talking about dehumanizing people, so you don't have a problem with treating them poorly or not helping. Or you look at the Middle East, for instance. We've dehumanized them, so it's okay to have drones drop bombs on them. And then the same thing in Africa. It was just them over there, so it's easy to turn our backs on it. Because as I understand it, maybe you've got a better grip on it, but Ebola has been around since the 90s. They've known about it.
Yeah, and we had an Ebola breakout here in the 90s. I mean, yes, and I think that's the important thing to drive home is that when we make people into an other, whether they be drug addicts and then we can send them away for the rest of their lives for selling coke, and that's somehow okay because they're dehumanized. Whether it's immigrants coming over here without papers, some of those are refugees. Whether they're children without papers. They're still human beings, but we have a way of making them into a nefarious threat and other. Whether it's someone who doesn't speak English, even though we don't have an official language of this country, they become dehumanized and become an other. Anybody in a foreign country way off there somewhere just becomes abstract, and we no longer think. And it really affects our foreign policy, because then our foreign policy at the end of the day should be self-serving, but we get this weird kind of indifference to the suffering of other countries and other people as people.
Yeah.
And, you should be talking about that on every single show, how we kind of collectively dismiss other people's status as human beings.
Well, we do. We talk about it. They don't matter. Corporations do. Our interests everywhere have nothing to do with the people or us, for that matter. It's all about our corporations. We wouldn't be in the Middle East if it weren't for oil. We wouldn't be in a lot of places if it wasn't. And I often talk about the pamphlet written by Smedley Butler back in the 30s. War's a racket. It's as much a racket now as it was back then.
Yeah, absolutely. And right, in the Middle East wouldn't be worth fighting for if it wasn't for oil.
Yeah, we've got enough sand here. We don't need any more.
Right, exactly.
But here at the end of this, where I think you're absolutely spot on is we've got to stop dehumanizing people and look to Africa. It's been a decade since we've really put any money into the NIH, into our research arm of our health. And look, now, to me, the blind side and the message to this is look what a decade of not investing in and thinking about tomorrow and investing in tomorrow and the research for tomorrow has done to us.
Right. And also, if you want to look at what would be, a libertarian utopia, there's a bunch of African nations that I could name off that would fit that criteria. And they're not spending any money on infrastructure. Everything horrible that hits this globe hits Africa, and there's a reason for it. It's because you have widespread corruption, no spending on infrastructure, the economy, their economy is tanked, but also they have weird beliefs that are anti-scientific, which we combat that in this country. What people don't, they know about epidemiology because they've been watching Walking Dead. But they combat some really weird superstitions in Africa, and we do that too, where we just kind of we think that if we stop spending, we will no longer get earthquakes. Apparently, allegedly educated people say that out loud in public. We have some of those issues here, but what we don't have is a government that is a failed state that is in free for all. We are still the richest nation in the world, and we have a government that is responding to this crisis. So far, it's the fatality rate is 1. Someone on the internet said that more people in this country have been dumped by Taylor Swift than have died of Ebola.
Wow. Yeah.
Fair.
There you go.
And and hopefully we will come through this kind of tuning out the scaremongering, which the polls seem to indicate.
I'm sure we'll be fine. All I know is my 12-year-old came home last week going, "Dad, it's the end." My social studies teacher said Ebola is the next epidemic, and we're all going to die, and we can't talk to each other or touch each other or none of that. It's the end of the world. And I said, "Sweetie, understand. It's not the end of the world."
I grew up in a doomsday group that was and the world was supposed to end in the 70s, and then it was supposed to end in like 93, and then afterwards it was just, can't be long now. So, we're closer than we ever have been to the end.
Yeah, and we're the ones going to cause it, because I grew up during the era of mutually assured destruction. The bomb was going to be dropped at any moment, and we were all joking that Reagan's Alzheimer's, he would hit the button while trying to call for room service, and it would be the end. But
right. Well, I grew up during the AIDS epidemic, and people were actually dying. There is an entire generation of gay men who were wiped off the face of the planet because of an epidemic that the government was ignoring and couldn't say the word. And we grew up completely terrified of bodily fluids or being around people, because that was how, that's how people died. And what happened was that we used science, not superstition. Everyone can be really shocked about this, to figure out how in this country to keep people alive for decades with HIV. Now, people are dying in Africa. The highest rate of HIV infection in the world.
Yeah, but we still preach no condoms.
Right, which is another issue. During when that was the one thing that Bush kind of gets credit for, and probably, and rightfully so. It's not even probably, rightfully so, was AIDS spending in Africa. But what they did, they had this like weird, like pro-life slant to it, where it was just like abstinence only. AIDS money, which was bizarre, because that's not actually a realistic public policy. It's definitely not harm reduction, and there's the data doesn't actually support that kind of spending. But another issue for another time. But Bush was actually responsive to that type of thing.
Yeah. So, and wrapping this up, and you go back to looking at the Ebola. Do you think we're going to start spending on this? Do you think that this is a wake up call for voters, for policymakers, to say, you know what, the decade that we took off from research and development, and maybe this defunding of our National Health Institute? Do you think this is going to be that moment where there's kind of like, like you said, growing up at the beginning, because when I was a kid, they called it grid. It wasn't even AIDS yet. And nobody was talking about it there. And then finally, somebody brought it to the attention of of policymakers, and we had this push. Do you see this being one of those moments?
I can only hope. This is something that, we've gone through these several plagues, right, where you have like the flu and monkeypox, and there was the bird flu, and then there was the swine flu, and then wasn't there another animal flu? And each time we're going to learn from this, and then we're going to do better next time. And, I can only be hopeful. I'm not a cynic yet. I think that, maybe that we can, if conservatives are talking about government spending on things that matter, that have mattered to me for decades, then, I think this is a good turn of events.
There you go. I can only hope. I can only hope. I can hope sane and rational thought eventually take us in the right direction. But Tina, I appreciate you taking time for us. It was great talking with you.
Thanks, Rick. Talk to you later.
Thanks so much. Tina Dupuy. Check out our website, tinadupuy.com. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. Stick around to listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Someone with a proven track record. Today the policeman's a union man. Brother firefighter's my friend. And the kids locked in the Capitol are fighting till the end. And we're not gonna break tonight, and we're not gonna bend. Some say the union's down, but I asked around.
Gosh, time flies when it's pushed along by a jet stream of greed. It seems like only yesterday that Walmart executives announced with self-congratulatory fanfare that the super-rich retailing colossus was not a Scrooge after all. Indeed, while the world's largest purveyor of stuff was not about to raise its poverty-level wages, it benevolently decided to provide a bare-bones health insurance plan to its 600,000 part-time employees, who make up nearly half of its total workforce. But quicker than you can spell avaricious, the $476 billion a year giant has now decided to renege, saying that as of January 1st, it will terminate coverage for employees who work less than 30 hours a week. Why that particular cutoff? Because also beginning next January 1st, people working less hours than that can apply for subsidized coverage from the public insurance exchanges created by our country's new Affordable Care Act. Yes, this means that super wealthy Walmart is piling the cost of its health care obligations onto the backs of its low-wage workers who might or might not be able to get a bit of a subsidy from us taxpayers. Walmart's slick honchos are effectively stealing a benefit meant to help low-income families, perverting it into a benefit for their own profiteering. But don't think they're Dickensian Scrooges coldly abandoning their employees. No, they say they're engaging a, quote, health coverage specialist to guide workers through the process of finding an insurance alternative. Of course, that will be the one financed by you and me. This is Jim Hightower saying, once again, the Waltons, the exploitative multi-billionaire heirs to the Walmart fortune, get the gold mine, while workers and taxpayers get the shaft. As the head of the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union said of this latest ripoff, it's shameful. But shameful is a core corporate value at Walmart.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham, the General Secretary of the 150 million member Global Worker Federation Industrial is condemning Nissan for attacking workers' rights in Mississippi. Jyrki Reina and an international delegation of trade union leaders from Japan, France, Brazil, the UK, Spain, and South Africa met with Canton, Mississippi Nissan workers to hear firsthand about Nissan's anti-union actions. In an interview with Workers Independent News, Jyrki Reina said Nissan needs to stop violating worker rights and let American workers in Mississippi join their global counterparts in organizing a union.
Nissan is a major multinational company that makes multi-billion-dollar profits every year. It has the moral obligation and also the financial possibility to offer the Mississippi workers decent wages, reasonable working hours, safe workplaces, and the right to join the union, and this is what we want.
The Industrial delegation also stopped to talk with workers at the VW plant in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and at the Mercedes plant near Tuscaloosa, Alabama. New UAW locals have been formed at both plants. Reina says U.S. unions and global unions are intensifying their joint international efforts to organize workers and defend labor rights.
We are really building a new era of global solidarity. Several U.S. unions which are affiliated with Industrial, including the auto workers, the steel workers, and the machinists, they are engaging actively in our global work. And they understand that solidarity is a two-way street. At the same time as we are trying to achieve decent conditions in the U.S., the U.S. unions are also operating all over the world to support organizing in Asia, in Latin America, in Africa.
This is Mitch Lawrence with the Sports Minute for Workers Independent News. We're in the middle of football season, and suddenly in the state of New Jersey, no one is talking about games or rankings or whether Geno Smith of the Jets should be benched because he missed a team meeting out in San Diego the other day. No, nearly everyone is talking about a town in central New Jersey called Sayreville, located about 45 miles from Manhattan. The other day, they canceled the rest of the football season for the high school team in Sayreville because what is being viewed largely as a hazing scandal. But when you read the allegations of what the upperclassmen were doing to their 14-year-old freshman teammates, you can come to only one conclusion. This is a massive sexual assault case. There's a criminal investigation taking place, and we sincerely hope that the perpetrators are prosecuted to the fullest. The coaching staff that apparently looked the other way at these alleged crimes also needs to be held responsible in some way as well. We do have some heroes emerging. They're the parents who have come forward to expose what their sons have gone through in the darkened locker room, the kinds of things no one should have to endure, not in Sayreville, New Jersey, or any place else. With a Sports Minute for Workers Independent News, this is Mitch Lawrence.
Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for an American comeback. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Power Professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
The proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
Oh, well, counting down. Here we are tomorrow. 3 weeks. 3 weeks from tomorrow, the big day, November 4th. I hope the calendar is marked. I hope you've got it on your agenda. I hope it's on the phone with a big beeping, get the vote. Hoping it's that kind of on your mind, because it's that important. We can't go through another 4 years of what we've gone through these last 4 years. The vision for tomorrow has got to be there, and people who have that vision, I think, are so very important. For the next 3 weeks, we're going to be focusing on candidates running for office, people who do have the vision, have a thought of where we've gone wrong and how we right the ship, which is why I've asked my good friend Jake Long, who's running for the 102nd State House District, JakeLong2014.com, the website. Jake, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thanks, Rick. I think you're absolutely right. I think this state needs a different vision. I think this state's going in the wrong direction. I think our priorities are all wrong, all skewed. And we need some fresh blood from the governor on down, and I'm hoping that I can be one of them.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I'm hoping that in 3 weeks from tomorrow we see a wholesale change. Because look, I mean, for me, one of the most important issues, education, right front and foremost, that should be one of the defining issues of this election. And on the gubernatorial level, it has been, because this governor has been horrible. But along with him came all of those people in the state house and in the state senate who went along with him in these crummy budgets.
Oh, absolutely. One of the hallmarks of my campaign is, and not that I stole it from the governor or the governor stole it from me, but that's probably one of the things that resonates with people more than anything, the funding for education. And that has so many implications. It has implications in tax fairness. Schools have been underfunded since Ridge was governor. In my area, we're now 36, 37% of the funding. It used to be standard at about 50%. And then we run into this governor who cut it even further. And there's a lot of implications that resonate with both Republicans and Democrats when you get into property taxes and you get in those people who are being hurt. It really does resonate, and that's probably been the number one issue: school funding, and the implications in the property tax situation.
Yeah, I'm going to want to bring that up in a minute because I think that's important. But you're in an interesting race, because as I understand it, there are 3-4 people running now. The Republicans are kind of all over the map, it seems.
Yes, there's the Republican that won the primary, and then there's an independent who has said that he will vote Republican. He's really being backed both figuratively and literally by the Republican hierarchy. And then you have the Tea Party candidate who ran against me as a write-in. She's running another write-in, but she's actually a Republican. So I have 3 Republicans running against me. I mean, I don't know. That might have happened before, but I never heard of it.
Yeah, but to me, it shows there's a sign of dysfunction there. That they can't seem to get their message together, to get their house in order. And I gotta imagine that when you're out talking to people, knocking on doors and kissing babies and all of that, that's got to come up.
Well, it does. It does, and people understand. And what they did was something even worse, Rick. They actually called for the resignation of the man who won the primary. I've never heard of that. I mean, that's total arrogance to say that we're gonna abrogate the will of the people and we don't care. And there was a huge outcry against it. In fact, the Republican Party lost a lot of support among their stalwarts for doing that.
So now, I mean, at the end of this, the way I see this is the district, the way it looks from the Republican side is in chaos. What they need is someone who's going to step forward and say, you know what, all of this insanity, all of this dysfunction, all of this chaos aside, this is the leadership and the direction we need to be going. And I'm hoping that that's you.
Well, I've tried to point that out exactly. I think my solutions, my positions on the issues are common sense. I really do. When you talk about these issues, Rick, they're not about Republican or Democrat. They're about people's issues. And when you tell them that, hey, look, schools have been underfunded. I know your parents have have been hurt. Some of the seniors have had to move out of their homes. When you talk about underfunding of the infrastructure, when you talk about this governor's position on medical cannabis, when you talk to veterans, a lot of them, they are not happy with the governor's position.
Now let's talk about the property tax issue, because I know that's one that you've been focused on a lot. There are those who believe that you just scrap the whole system, just cause chaos, and we'll see what comes out of it, which seems to me to be really, and the best way I can characterize this is an ignorant position. This idea that let's cause a crisis and see what pops up just seems stupid to me. I'm hoping there's a better way, a way to make sure that seniors don't lose their homes, but also that school districts don't lose the predictability of the revenue and the income coming in, so that our kids do get a good education.
No, you're absolutely right. The irony is, Rick, that all three of my Republican opponents, now they're supposed to be conservatives, and yet they're latching on to Senate Bill 76 comes in and mandates that every school district in the state eliminate property taxes as a form of income. Now, most school districts right now, Rick, and I don't think most people understand it right now, because of the underfunding by the state, school taxes or property taxes are providing about 2/3 of the income for schools. And Senate Bill 76 would come in and eliminate that. Not only would it eliminate that, the funding mechanism, it's been vetted, it's been studied by the Department of the Department of State up in the Capitol, and they've come to the conclusion in the first 5 years you're going to have about $1 billion of underfunding.
And then what does that mean to class size? What does that mean to curriculum? What does that mean to extracurriculars? What does that mean for the public education system? And I can only imagine it means more privatization and more push towards education incorporated, which is exactly where I think the people pushing this want us to go.
Yes, I think it's even worse than that, Rick. I think some of this supporting the Senate Bill 76 is directed against public schools. It's directed against teachers. It's directed against the teachers union. And I think they know that going in, and this is their way to kind of get at these organizations that they don't like in a roundabout way, but it's very destructive to public education. And as of now, from what I understand, it does not have the support to pass, and I think that's thank God. It's deficient in other ways too. It's not just the funding; it's the taxes. And the supporters of Senate Bill 76, Rick, really haven't been honest with the people. I mean, it's actually going to increase dramatically the taxes for small businesses. There's a whole sub-layer, a whole plethora of taxes that it's going to increase, and I don't think the supporters have been honest with the public. There's no free lunch. And this bill is deficient in 2 or 3 huge ways, and right now it doesn't have the support. I think it makes a lot of sense if you want to do something, you do it at the local level. That's why it's important to get the funding up to as close to 50% as we can get it. And then we address the issue of those who are being hurt. I think that's the way to do it, Rick.
And to me, look, I don't want anybody to lose their home because the property taxes have gone up, especially when you're talking about seniors or low-income people. There's got to be a mechanism at which we make sure that doesn't happen. The story out in the western part of the state where, a woman lost her home for $1.80 or whatever it was because she didn't pay the bill and it went through the process to take her home away. It's just ludicrous to me. I don't think anyone should lose their home. So there's got to be a smarter way of doing this, right?
Absolutely. And once again, you got to get that funding back out. Give school districts flexibility. I think it can be done. I have a real aversion, Rick, to seniors losing their home, and I understand that some of them do qualify for the homestead exemption. But the truth is, think about it. Many of these seniors, especially the ones who are living by themselves, the only raise in income is a couple paltry dollars they get from Social Security. Meanwhile, expenses are going up, their taxes are going up, and their income's basically staying the same. I was amazed at the number of people, and I've knocked on thousands of doors in the last 10 weeks. I was amazed at the number of seniors in the late 70s, 80s, and you'd be surprised the number of 90-year-olds who are out there trying to hold on to their home, and they're they're tenaciously trying to hold on to that because that's their freedom, and I understand that. And there's something innately wrong with seniors having to sell their homes.
No, I'm right there with you.
priorities are skewed.
I'm with you. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Jake Long, candidate for the State House 102nd District. JakeLong2014.com, the website. We've got a link at the ricksmithshow.com. You can go on there, figure out how you can volunteer in the next couple weeks. 3 weeks from tomorrow is election day. Also, a couple of dollars probably wouldn't hurt either. And talking about seniors staying in their homes, one of the things that I'm a big advocate of is helping to get more home health care workers and more home health care aides and paying them a reasonable wage so that they can keep seniors in their home. Have you heard much on the trail of trying to keep seniors home in their homes with the use of home health care workers?
Oh, a little bit. To be honest, not a lot, but I concur with that sentiment, Rick. That would be one way to help these seniors. We need to do everything we can to help them, especially the ones that are being squeezed by the system, especially the ones that are living by themselves.
Yeah. Let me bang through a couple of quick things. Minimum wage. Do we raise it 10-10? What's the number? Do we raise it at all? I guess first question.
Oh my. Absolutely. We shoot for 10-10. I mean, the political reality is we may get it and we may not, but we definitely shoot. We shoot for 10-10. I think what we need to do, Rick, and I think you'll concur, take the politics out of it. Let's index it for inflation. Take the politics out of it, because you and I both know every 5, 6, 7 years we go through this circus, and the political machinations. Minimum wage should go up every time the cost of living goes up.
So we should index it to inflation. So every year you get a raise, or as in the case of Colorado after the Bush recession, it actually went down a little bit.
Well, I mean, we can even take care of that. We can say that you can handle that two ways. You can either accept it as one of the negatives, or you can put the language in that bill. But we definitely need to raise the minimum wage, and I think if we index to inflation, that's the way to go.
Medicaid expansion. I know the governor got an okay for his scheme, which I'm not thrilled with. Do we push for a true Medicaid expansion?
Absolutely. I think. I mean, let's be honest. This guy, once again, his moniker is Tommy Corporate. Once again, he's protecting one of his big campaign contributors. That's a shame, because what he's doing by forcing these people to buy it on the open market, he's really minimizing the effect of the $42.5 billion, and we're not going to be able to cover as many people, and that's a shame.
That is a shame.
Mention the fact that every year we delayed it, we lost money.
So last question I've got for you. As you're out there, we've talked about the minimum wage. We've talked about property taxes. What seems to be the other issue on the minds of people as you're talking to them?
Well, I think it's just a matter of tax fairness. I believe there's a sense that the system is not being fair to them, and it's squeezing them. And I think they're absolutely right. And another issue, and this is I believe becoming more prevalent. They believe that the government isn't working for them, Rick. Some of the people have lost faith in the government. I think there's some things that we can do. One of the big things in my campaign is gerrymandering. I mean, let's be honest. We've gerrymandered some of these districts where some of these people are running for office can't lose. And that's just flat out wrong. And if we really want the government that we deserve, we got to change that system. And I understand it's gonna take a constitutional change, but we really need to try to be like other states, principally California or Iowa, where they set up an independent commission and set up these districts so that it's done in a non-political, common sense way. And what that would do, it would force these people to run for office to be competitive. The districts would be competitive. You're going to find out that if we can do that, you're going to have a better quality representative, state representative, senator, congressman, and ultimately you're going to have better government. But we got to get away from this system where we're really propagating career politicians, and that's not good for representative democracy.
There you go. Jake, I appreciate you taking time for us. I know you've got doors to knock on and voters to convince, so I won't hold you up. I appreciate you taking time for us.
Well, thanks, Rick.
And best of luck again. JakeLong2014.com, the number, the website. We've got a link at the ricksmithshow.com. Help him out. Go out, knock on doors, maybe throw him a couple of bucks. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
This is a fading American dream. I got no time now to glorify now. Before I take a job, don't want to go for. I'm just searching for my dignity. This is a fading American dream. This is a fading American dream. This is a fading American dream.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
January of 1964 was a time to remember for many Americans. The Beatles released their first album. New York announced plans to build a World Trade Center. The Surgeon General announced smoking kills, and President Lyndon Johnson declared a war on poverty during his first State of the Union address. January 1964 was also a momentous year for the American truck drivers. The nation's truckers saw the first nationwide labor contract. The National Master Freight Agreement, covering some 450,000 truck drivers employed by 16,000 companies across the country, set a nationwide minimum wage of $3.33 per hour, or $23.63 in 2008 dollars, as well as providing health care and retirement benefits for all its members. The 1964 National Master Freight Agreement set a nationwide standard for working conditions, giving drivers a voice on the job and the power to stand up to abusive treatment, and eventually the ability to refuse to drive equipment the driver deemed unsafe. Led by labor visionary James R. Hoffa, this victory was the crowning achievement of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters as one of America's most influential unions. This landmark agreement created a framework for all national contracts to follow. Jimmy Hoffa, the man who famously quipped, "I may have many faults, being wrong is not one of them," was certainly right about the benefits, power, and influence of such a national agreement for workers, both union and non-union. Wages and benefits earned by truck drivers brought millions of hardworking men and women solidly into the middle class by rewarding hard work with a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. For generations, the National Master Freight Agreement served as the industry standard for all truck drivers, raising wages, improving benefits, and providing a safer workplace for drivers and the motoring public. Unfortunately, since the 1980 passage of trucking deregulation, the industry has resorted to cutthroat competition based on who was willing to work for less. In this environment, the National Master Freight Agreement has lost some of its power in lifting truck drivers out of low wage, no benefit, and hazardous conditions. Currently, many non-union truck drivers are earning at or near poverty wages while pushing legal limits. For many truckers, their pay is solely determined by the number of miles they drive. Breakdowns, time spent waiting to be loaded and unloaded, and other delays are shouldered by the driver, in most cases without compensation. 1964 and the years that followed has shown what can be accomplished by workers standing together. Perhaps the future will see resurgence in worker solidarity and the reemergence of a fair day's work, a fair day's pay. This Rick Smith Show Labor History Moment is brought to you by a grant from the Labor Education Center at IUP. For more information, go to www.thericksmithshow.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
There have been 5 men that served as President of the United States without ever getting elected to the office. It doesn't seem like a big number, but it's about 1 out of every 9 presidents. The first was John Tyler, elected to serve as William Henry Harrison's vice president in 1840. Harrison had defeated incumbent President Martin Van Buren using the slogan, "Tippecanoe and Tyler too," but he died of pneumonia just a few weeks into his term. This was a first for the country, and there was informal debate as to whether the vice president was to be a caretaker without the full power of an elected president. But Tyler didn't wait on an answer. He forcefully took over the reins, and one of his lasting legacies was establishing that an ascending VP would be cloaked with the full power of the office. Join us again for Millard Fillmore. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Where family values are more than slogans. The Rick Smith Show.
All because the gays are getting married, that is why people die and children go unfed. When I'm sad and alone and I'm wondering just why everything about my life is feeling like it's going down a toilet bowl. It's good to know it's caused the gays.
Yes. That's their Ebola. I'm waiting for that. I'm waiting for that frame. It's because of the gays. That's the reason Ebola is here. We're being punished with plagues and locusts. Oh, it's just nuts. And you know what? The thing that gets me is it's really, you look at these extreme religious positions, and that's, look, extremism scares me, as I think it should scare everyone. This idea of the fringe, the way out. And I've always been, and I guess this is growing up as a kid, one of those things that growing up as a kid, I remember just the hypocrisy right in front of me. The guy who on Sunday, and I to this day, I remember his face. You would see him, with his arm around the priest on Sunday, basically, the holy roller, making sure everyone saw him being as pious and as loud and as obnoxious as he could be, preaching and doing all that stuff, which was weird for the Catholic Church when I was growing up. But there he was on Sunday, being, Mr. the Pope. Yet on Saturday night, you'd see him out on the stroll picking up the hookers. And it was one of those things that just grabbed me. The same thing when I got older, one of the guys who was, would pass the plate and, was the one, doing all of the things in public. Turns out he was one of the biggest thieves. In fact, they caught him on camera. I used to call him the movie star because they caught him on camera stealing thousands of dollars from the collection plate. And I always find that those folks who are the ones who preach the loudest, who are the ones, hey, look at me and how wonderful and pious I am. Those are the folks who, they got some weird stuff in their background. And it's not even just in reality. I mean, look at TV, for instance. You remember that? And I'm sure you've seen the story. There was a TV series called Seventh Heaven. I actually have never seen it. But I do remember like the promos for it. It was it's not something I would have been interested in, but evidently the actor who played the pastor in the Seventh Heaven family, quote unquote, family series, evidently, admitted to his wife during some therapy session that he had some relations with the underage girl. And look, what was it? It was, and this is why I hate this stuff. I mean, you look at the Donald Sterling tapes. This was because of a divorce, and it was about money. And the same thing here. This was about a divorce, and it was about money. But here he is. He's been fired from most of his jobs. He's done as an actor, and rightly so. If you're out there, having sex with underage girls, I don't know. And whatever else pops up out of this, I guess. But in real life, I look at this story that's come out of Akron. According to the Akron Beacon Journal, which is doing, I guess, a 6-part series on this Ernest Angley. And I remember him as a kid. And I remember how much I despised him on TV then. Because he just... Again, any of these people who are out there doing this, I don't trust. Evidently, Ernest is a 93-year-old televangelist now. He was much younger back then. Probably looks about the same, though, with the hair gel. Evidently, according to the report put out by the Akron Beacon Journal, I guess people who were members of his church have accused him of, improperly touching them and forcing men to have vasectomies. He said that he had helped so many boys down through the years. And evidently, abortions and all this other stuff that you kind of go, wait a second. But the one part that caught me in the story, evidently, he's been accused of homosexual activities, which for a televangelist, especially of that era, he said, quote, "I'm not a homosexual. God wouldn't use a homosexual like he uses me. He calls me his prophet, and I am. So he's talking to somebody now. Evidently, Ainsley went on to explain that they called Jesus a homosexual. Did you know that, he asks? And still do, because he was with men. And I sat here and I sat back and I thought about it, all of my readings and all of this. I don't ever remember anybody ever saying Jesus was gay, but okay. Maybe he was, who knows? But the good televangelist is saying he is. So I'm curious, because he admits to viewing young boys naked, but he quote unquote, they uncovered themselves, but I never handled them at all. So he just looked, I guess. Is it what he's saying? I'm kind of freaked out by all this. But also, according to the report, it's claimed that he abused young boys. It's accused that he forced vasectomies and abortions. And I guess what they're saying in this report is that and this blows my mind because it goes completely against the whole go forth and be fruitful thing. I guess the good Ernest Ainsley, the Grace Cathedral televangelist, said that you should have the vasectomies and the abortions because kids take money away from the church. Which again takes me back to the whole point. It's all about the money. It's all about putting money in their pockets at the expense of everyone else. And it's, to me, this stuff, big ripoff. Quick break, right back.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
Do you believe, sir, in global warming?
Senator Mitch McConnell dodges the climate change question.
So, gentlemen, we're now going to move to yes or no questions. Do you believe humans are contributing significantly to climate change?
Well, I've said all along climate is changing.
This is yes or no.
Look,
yes
this
or
is
Republican candidates retreat from climate denial. U.S. auto fleet achieves record fuel efficiency. Plus,
is regular clean enough for your family? Not when you can have clean coal clean.
Clean coal goes online in Canada. But there's a catch.
Say it ain't so. All of those catches and more straight ahead. For BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Senator, that's a yes or no question. Do you believe in global warming?
It is not a yes or no question.
Old boy came out a little defensive, a little ballsy, I think, with a little attitude.
A little bit of a jerk, maybe. Came across those.
A little bit of a jerk? Not my Senator Mitch McConnell. This is your Green News Report. Yep. Okay, Desi Doyen. So the climate change denialism from Republicans in the primaries is now coming back to haunt the Republicans in the generals.
Yup. But we'll have more on that in a moment. First, good news. The U.S. has hit a record for fuel efficiency. Despite 40 years of obstruction from the U.S. auto industry, the Obama administration in 2009 finally succeeded in setting higher mileage standards for cars and trucks so you don't have to buy so much gas. And now the Environmental Protection Agency announced this week that new cars and trucks sold in the U.S. have hit a record for fuel economy, 24 miles per gallon fleet-wide. And surprise, the auto industry did not collapse.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought that nobody wanted fuel-efficient cars and that it would, like everything else Republicans are concerned about, destroy the economy.
And again, they were wrong. Meanwhile, with the midterm elections less than 1 month away, finally, the corporate media has decided that climate change is now a thing and is asking about it in every major race. So, of course, now Republicans are backing off their earlier outright denial in the primaries, since now they have to appeal to voters in the general election. In Colorado, the Republican candidate for U.S. Senator, Representative Cory Gardner, tried retreat and evasion.
Do you believe humans are contributing significantly to climate change?
Well, I've said all along, climate is
Yes,
changing.
this is yes or no.
Look,
Yes
this
or
is an important issue, and I don't think you can say yes or
But
no.
you've got
to
60
important
seconds after.
I believe the climate is changing. I disagree to the extent that has been in the news that man has caused.
And Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell of Kentucky evaded the question, too, with the old "I am not a scientist" dodge. And he did it twice in 1 week.
We can debate this forever. George Will had a column in the last year or so pointing out that in the 70s we were concerned that the ice age was coming. I'm not a scientist.
Yeah, neither is Fox News' George Will, by the way. And in the 70s, when there was a tiny handful of scientists concerned about an ice age, the majority of climate scientists were still worried about global warming that guys like Mitch McConnell pretend is not going on.
Now, that interview was with the Cincinnati Enquirer. McConnell did it again in a testy interview with Kentucky Sports Radio.
Do you believe, sir, in global warming?
What I have said repeatedly is I'm not a scientist, but what I can tell you is even if you thought that was important, and there's some scientists who do and some scientists who don't, but even if you thought that was important, the United States doing this by itself is going to have zero impact.
So do you, but that's a yes, Senator, that's a yes or no question. Do you believe in global warming?
It is not a yes or no question. I'm not a scientist.
I love the fact that he's not a scientist, but he is a scientist enough to know that doing anything about the problem will have no effect on the global climate. Go figure.
Yeah.
Mitch McConnell, occasional scientist.
Meanwhile, in an attempt to save the coal industry from its own pollution, the U.S. taxpayer has already spent over $5 billion on an experimental plant to capture carbon emissions from burning coal. That's commonly referred to as clean coal.
Clean coal harnesses the awesome power of the word clean. Clean coal is supported by the coal industry, the most trusted name in coal.
Yes, it is.
Now, that expensive experimental plant in the U.S. is in Mississippi. But in Canada, the world's first carbon capture coal plant is now online. But there's a catch to these projects, as noted by Chris Hayes on MSNBC.
We will be actually selling the carbon dioxide to an oil company to help them take more petroleum out of the ground.
You heard that right. The carbon captured by this clean coal plant is going to facilitate oil drilling.
Hooray! By the way, kudos to Chris Hayes. You know, we have been beating up on the media for years for not covering climate change, and Chris Hayes has been doing all week a special on coal country with a lot of great stories and a lot of great interviews. So we should note when someone in the mainstream media actually gives this issue the coverage it deserves. For much more of the coverage it deserves, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. While you're there, please consider a donation to help the Green News Report stay on your public airwaves. Don't forget, you can find us and follow us on the Twitters and the Facebook at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Can you hear the death knell toll for old King Cole?
I love this country. I should love this state. It just feels good being back in Michigan. You know, the trees are the right height. The streets are just right.
There is trouble in the forest, and the creatures all have fled. As the maple stream crashing, and the oaks just shake their heads.
Oh, yeah, the trees. The trees are just the right height. I wonder if the trees are the right height in Iowa. Evidently, Mittens was out stumping for their Tea Party crazy senatorial candidate, and decided he was going to tell a funny joke. He's Mr. Funny Ha-Ha. And then look, does it surprise me that it's a bad joke? That it was even poorly delivered? No, doesn't surprise me at all. But I thought I would share it a little bit with you. This is Mitt Romney's joke. Said President Obama went to the bank to cash a check. Didn't have ID. And the teller said, "You've got to prove who you are." He said, "Well, how should I do that?" She said, "The other day, Phil Mickelson came in, but he didn't have his ID, so he set up a little cup on the ground, took a golf ball and putted it right in. And we knew it was Phil Mickelson, and we cashed his check." And then there was Andre Agassi, who came in, and Andre Agassi didn't have his ID either. We put a little target on the wall, took out a tennis ball and a racket, and, he hit that target. And we knew it was Andre Agassi, and we cashed his check. And she said to him, I guess to Obama, "Is there any way that you can prove who you are?" And Obama said, "I don't have a clue." And she said, "Well, Mr. President, do you want your money in small bills or large bills?" Oh, that's funny. That's funny. That is way too funny. I'm here to talk a little bit about the joke. And 3 weeks from tomorrow, Election Day, I've asked Bob Weiner to come talk with us. Bob is a former White House spokesman for 6.5 years, former congressional spokesman for several congressmen. He is the guy when it comes to being the press secretary, the guy on the message. He is it. That's why I've got him here. So, Bob, what do you think of the joke?
Well, I think thanks, first of all, for all that, Rick. And your show is fantastic. I always love doing it. But it's interesting that Romney uses Agassi instead of Djokovic or Nadal. It shows where he is. He'll stay one of the 47%.
But I thought about it. I'm going really. I watched the crowd, and the crowd didn't know whether they should laugh or they should look at each other. It was kind of like his run for president. Kind of sad.
Yeah, he's stilted. You can't forget his dog on the roof. His kids should borrow from their parents, and the host of other things that he said, let alone the 47%. And he just is of, by, and for such money that I can't wait to have him finally declare and go up against Hillary.
Do you think because he's come out and said he's just not going to do it? He says he's not interested.
That's why he's running around to every state campaigning for every congressman and senator in all the critical places. That's exactly why he's doing that. He actually told some media interviews that things can change, and the magic of things can change. Those words mean I'm going to run if everybody else. Right now, he's at 35-8 compared to everybody else in Iowa.
Yeah.
In the Republicans. So I don't know if I were him in the Republican Party, 35-8 over Jeb and Rand Paul and all of that, I'd run.
I'm with you. So again, it puts him in that position to where he can look like the outsider and still be doing the do. So let's talk about it. 3 weeks from tomorrow, we're going to make midterm decisions. There's talk, and I'm hoping that the talk is just talk. That the Republicans could take the Senate. How do you see that boiling out?
Oh, you're not going to like what I say. Right now, Rick, it's a wave election for the Republicans. The polling is pretty clear. The trending is pretty clear. Now, what does a wave mean? A wave can mean 5, 6, or 7, or 8, or 9. If it's 5, then we keep the Senate, but that's still a wave election against us. So the real question is, and then, by the way, in 2016, all the seats that are vulnerable become Republican seats, and then we can sweep back in, is what the consensus, smarties are saying.
Right.
So the question is, why are we in a wave now? And I'm going to tell you the reason. It's not Ebola. It's not ISIS. It's because, Obama's doing everything on ISIS. Just today, he spoke with the president of France and the head of the United Nations, putting together screenings at airports and getting concrete commitments to fight ISIS. So he's doing everything that he can. Unless anybody wants a ground war, by the way. Anybody raise your hands if you want a ground war or
John
another
McCain
one in the Middle East. So he's doing everything that you can to basically to get a consensus and to get a coalition from the rest of the world and their own region so they defend themselves. We can't. Biden was right. You know, we can't even get our allies to be aggressive there. Turkey won't even defend its own border. They expect us to do it all. Well, guess what? It ain't our job to deplete our money. That's what Al-Qaeda's objective is, if you read bin Laden's manifesto. It's to deplete the West and to deplete its economy and to bleed them and to send them chasing white flags at the end of various territories. That's what he said in his memo, the one that we found when we outed it, when we killed him. Why do we have to play that game? We don't. And so, but the sad thing is, we are all silent on our accomplishments, Rick. And where is the message? Where is the ad? And I'm going to be doing this op-ed. That's what I do now since I left the White House. Is I do op-eds in top papers and press releases and host. You know, I head up a public affairs company, so I use it. And where are the ads that say we're at half the unemployment we were when Bush left it to Obama? We're at 5.9 versus 10. And by the way, it would be a point more if they hadn't blocked the president's job bill, according to CBO and CRS. We'd be at 4.9 unemployment, and we have 1 million more jobs. If unlike any other administration, when I worked in Congress, where you bipartisan-wise created jobs bills. And what about the fact that the stock market, even with its tweaks over the last few days, is triple what it was when Obama came in? What about the fact that there are 5 million jobs available, the most since 2001? So what about these kinds of economic facts? That even business, because Democrats are even better for business because they create jobs. What about the fact that business was saved by the legislation when Obama first came in? So where are the ads that take those credits for that instead of letting the Republicans try to trump us with this stuff about IRS and ISIS? And I mean, by the way, Ebola? What are we talking about here? We're talking about an African disease that only because people came in over here has gotten 2 people, whereas 4,000 have died in Africa. They've got 8,000 cases in Africa. What we're doing is altruistic. Right. It's because we are the great United States of America and we want to help the world. But let's not have a paranoia and a fear over here about some disease that's killed a total of 2 people that either came over or got it from somebody who came over. What are we talking about?
So it's not the end of the world then? I've been told it's the end of the world. This is
even Jim Baker was on the Sunday talk shows, and I saw it where he said, you know, we've been through a lot worse than what we are now. I mean, this is nothing compared to World War II, you know?
Yeah, but you know, this is horrible. This could be. I'm told it's the end of the world. This is the next bubonic plague.
That's how the Republicans want to play it. And you know, if you go to my op-eds, by the way, I invite our listeners, Rick. And you know, I got to do this, right? You promote your show, and I'm going to promote our. But it's what I believe in. Go to my op-eds, www.weinerpublic.com. Obamacare haters still hurting public. You know, they want to stop what people are now getting, the pre-existing conditions, the age 26, the lifetime benefits, the preventive care, the 80% has to be spent on you from the insurance companies, the Medicaid expansions that are out there. They want to stop all of that and send it all back to the insurance companies. That's what the Republicans want to do. So I wrote that op-ed in the South Florida Sun-Sentinel just last week. And then a week before that in the Michigan Chronicle, Democratic messages to avoid wave election. Where are our ads on jobs, on the success of health care, on the fact that we are saving Social Security and Medicare and the Republicans want to privatize it, on the fact that the Republicans want to do forced transvaginal ultrasound invasions, which, by the way, the UN calls rape, and Democrats want to give women health choice, and the Republicans are closing clinics. Where is the fact that we're trying to increase the minimum wage, which has stayed effectively the same? It's actually worth 1/3 less today than 1968 in real dollars. The budget has fallen in half since Obama took office. We have a comprehensive immigration bill, and don't blame Obama for the fact that he did a hold on an executive action. He has a bill that got past the Senate. The House Republicans are blocking it. The stimulus bill. Obama took out bin Laden, pure and simple. And Romney said any other president would have done it. Well, no, Bush actually gave the intel away to the Afghanis and the Pakistanis, and they leaked it or screwed it up, whereas Obama kept it secret with our SEALs, and we got them. So where are those messages? Because those are huge successes, and I'm telling people, and the historians will record it, that his presidency has been Rooseveltian in terms of its accomplishments. But the Republicans would have you believe the guy's inept.
Well, I mean, that's what they do to the whole party, so that you don't vote for them, and that's duh. I mean, that's the whole point. You demonize the guy who's sitting in the White House so that you can take over the Senate in a wave kind of election like we're seeing. That's the whole point, isn't it?
Well, that's what they're successfully doing, and they've got the polling because the silence is deafening from our side on our successes of what we've accomplished.
Why is that?
It's just because there's a reason. Because we're so insistent on doing the state by state. Remember the Dean 50 state plan?
Right.
But I had a debate with Rahm when he was incoming chair of the DCCC. Risha McMahon, who was the head of Clinton for New Hampshire, and myself went into Rahm because I knew Rahm from the White House when I worked there, and he worked there. And so I went in and I said, "This is crazy, Rahm. We got to have a national message on our." At that point, it was against the Iraq War and protecting Social Security. We got to have a national message, and now it's all the things I just mentioned. And then Rahm said, "You're absolutely right," and he's planning on doing it, and he did. And guess what? We took the House back when Rahm did that. But now we're back to the state by state. Don't spend the money on national. Spend it only in the states. Give it to each local member so that, it's the local members. It's turf. The local Congress people and senators who are running and our candidates are demanding the money go to them because that's the only way it can be effective. To which I say nonsense. This is the 21st century. And in this day and age, people listen and feel and think nationally as well as all politics are local. It is both. And when both Howard Dean with his 50-state strategy and Rahm with his national strategy put it together, and even though Rahm, when he got into the White House, wouldn't give anything to Dean because of that jealousy, they were both right. And they both did their thing, and we won as a result. That's what's got to happen here.
So let me ask you, 3 weeks from tomorrow, the day that we decide, and hopefully, I'm hoping you're wrong. I'm hoping we don't see this, although I know you're right. Well, what do we do?
Well, if every one of our listeners contacts your Congress people and your senators in Pennsylvania, is as critical as anywhere, because the Pennsylvania legislature, as we all know, wants to steal the election and turn it over with voter suppression. So if, your head of your legislature said, "Hey, we could win this way if we do this voter suppression." He actually was quoted saying that if we pass this voter suppression bill, it'll help Romney win. It'll give Romney the state, is what the guy said. Remember?
Yep. His name was Mike Turzai.
Yeah. So if we all got to do what we can do in the places where we can do it. And if you have contacts, if our listeners have contacts outside of Pennsylvania, right there too. I'm going to do it. I'm doing it tomorrow. I'm putting this press release out that basically just verbalized to you, and I'm gonna put it out there, and then hopefully, because and I have a list of all the decision makers in the White House and the Congress and this and that, and I send our op-eds out to everybody, and so that's we'll all do what we can do, but it's not enough coming from me. It's got to come from everybody out there.
There you go, and that's why tomorrow, 3 weeks from tomorrow, is so very important. Get out. You got to vote. I know the polls are saying the gubernatorial race is over. You still got to go vote. It's that simple.
That's right. The best defense against voter suppression is to do what we did in 2008 and 2012, which is stand in long lines and beat the odds. And that's how Obama won in both years. Unfortunately, in the off-year elections, in congressional elections, we have a 50 million. That's a real number. Consider there are only 300 million people in America. 50 million fewer people vote in the congressional elections when they're only congressional than they do when there's a presidential election. And Steny Hoyer told me, and he's right, the number 2 in the House, who I was in the Young Democrats with and we're friends, he said, "You know who all those votes are? They're Democrats. Republicans know that if everybody votes, Democrats win." And it's just outrageous what happens in the congressional elections. We get shafted because we don't have a turnout. So please vote.
Yep. I got to get out there and vote. Bob, it's always great talking with you. I appreciate you taking time for us, and I appreciate the passion.
Great. Rick, thanks so much. You too. And the best of luck to you. Keep your show going. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
keep that show going.
All right. Bob, thanks so much. Bob Weiner, political strategist, former White House spokesperson, congressional spokesman, basically the the voice of reason. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people. Come to
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
Gosh, time flies when it's pushed along by a jet stream of greed. It seems like only yesterday that Walmart executives announced with self-congratulatory fanfare that the super-rich retailing colossus was not a Scrooge after all. Indeed, while the world's largest purveyor of stuff was not about to raise its poverty-level wages, it benevolently decided to provide a bare-bones health insurance plan to its 600,000 part-time employees, who make up nearly half of its total workforce. But quicker than you can spell avaricious, the $476 billion a year giant has now decided to renege, saying that as of January 1st, it will terminate coverage for employees who work less than 30 hours a week. Why that particular cutoff? Because also beginning next January 1st, people working less hours than that can apply for subsidized coverage from the public insurance exchanges created by our country's new Affordable Care Act. Yes, this means that super wealthy Walmart is piling the cost of its healthcare obligations onto the backs of its low-wage workers who might or might not be able to get a bit of a subsidy from us taxpayers. Walmart's slick honchos are effectively stealing a benefit meant to help low-income families, perverting it into a benefit for their own profiteering. But don't think they're Dickensian Scrooges coldly abandoning their employees. No, they say they're engaging a, quote, health coverage specialist to guide workers through the process of finding an insurance alternative. Of course, that will be the one financed by you and me. This is Jim Hightower saying, once again, the Waltons, the exploitative multi-billionaire heirs to the Walmart fortune, get the gold mine, while workers and taxpayers get the shaft. As the head of the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union said of this latest ripoff, it's shameful. But shameful is a core corporate value at Walmart.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Voter ID, which is going to allow Governor Romney to win the state of Pennsylvania. Done.
Taking care of business every day. Taking care of business every way. I've been taking care of business. It's all right. Taking care of business and working overtime.
Oh, yes. Voter suppression done. Brought to us by the good Senate Majority Leader, or House Majority Leader, Mike Turdzai. Yeah, done. Just think of what it would have been like to have a President Romney. Think of the insanity that would have ensued. I think it would have been funnier. I think it'd have been interesting watching the Republicans contort and twist and contort themselves into weird positions, trying to figure out how to then take the messaging and run with it when all of this stuff, because it's so much easier right now. You know, being in the opposition, it's so much easier because you can just blame Obama for everything, and it plays well with the crazy base that I find interesting. But what can you do? Fun. Anyway, welcome back to the program. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any portion of the program, get the app on the smartphone, take the program on the go, wherever you go. All there and free. Interesting new report put out by the folks over at NASA. Evidently, according to them, September was globally the warmest month in the history of existence, or since they've been keeping records, which was 1880. The beginning of kept records. And they're also saying that the period of time between January and September, already third warmest on record. They are projecting this to be the hottest year on record. The hottest year on record. And that isn't even taking into account that we're waiting for the beginning of El Nino, which again, as they point out, El Nino is another one of those examples of how we're screwing the planet up. And you go back and go, even if you don't believe that we are, technology, common sense, moving forward seems rational to me. It just is. But I look at it. It was a stinking hot summer, and as things continue to get worse, well, the electric companies will do well. The air conditioning companies will do well. We'll see. We'll see how it works out. But there you go. The warmest on record globally. Just amazing stuff. Anyway, if you missed any portion of the program, the ricksmithshow.com, that's where you go to get the podcast. Stitcher on the smartphone, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Pretty simple stuff. Looking forward to the rest of the week. And tomorrow, like I said, mark it on your calendar, 3 weeks from tomorrow, Election Day. Can you believe that this time went so quickly? I mean, I was still waiting to be inundated. I was waiting to be inundated. It just hasn't happened. Just amazing. Anyway, thanks for being here. We'll see you.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's coming like the tide flood beneath the lunar sway. Imperial, mysterious, and amorous array. Democracy is coming to the USA.